You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Here is the last visible frames of Hurricane Fiona as we enter another evening. You can see some of those islands, albeit slightly poorly drawn, of the Turks and Caicos, which the storm made a very close pass to earlier on, and is now just past there and sweeping northwards out over the western Atlantic. Next stop for Fiona is Bermuda, quite likely, where a tropical storm watch has now been issued, and I expect they'll get more serious warnings in maybe 24 hours time. But here is Fiona moving northwards now, mostly, if not completely northwards, and is a category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale with winds of 115 miles per hour and an estimated central pressure at 959 millibars. Powerful. Along with Fiona, we've now seen the arrival of Gaston, which has formed in the north-central Atlantic, way off to the east, and is already looking very interesting. We'll take a look at that in a moment. And we also have an area of interest that now has a high chance of developing as it enters the southern and eastern Caribbean Sea, and certainly has a substantial or significant future ahead of it by the looks of the forecasts. We'll be covering all of these systems tonight in depth on our update here, including a live branded tropical weather bulletin in our third hour of 3. My name is Nathan Foy here in the studio once again, and hopefully we put on a good stream tonight that's useful. Well then, there is a look once again at Fiona. That is still pretty much our main headline. And you can take a look at it again on this imagery here, looking at the infrared, looking very decent in those later frames. Maybe one or two dry slots, but it's blowing up some good convective tops. It's got obviously a very nice looking eye, and I imagine a decent eye temperature inside that. I guess what's holding it back in terms of its intensity is the actual observations that we're getting, and that is determined by the recon planes that they're in the storm right now, and we'll get an update on that in a moment. But first of all, before we go there, there's just another look at Fiona, and let's show you Gaston. There it is, entering the nighttime hours, much further towards the east. That could be a threat, possibly, to the Azores later on. But interestingly, from 0 to potentially showing an eye feature, if that might be the case. But certainly wrapping around nicely. And our team are currently running with a 60 miles per hour sustained wind at present, which is a whole 20 miles per hour higher than the National Hurricane Centre's update, which they've initialized the storm at this at 5 p.m. at 40 miles per hour. So I'm sure we'll get commentary on what our team think of that. And joining us tonight are some of the old guard, actually. It feels like olden days with David and Tim. Hello to both of you.
Evening, Nathan and viewers, and it's good to be here once again.
Yeah, good evening, Nathan. It's definitely great to be back in this studio.
And we brought you on because you were monitoring closely the recon data. What can you tell us about it right now? Because I believe they're right in on it.
Yes, they are, Nathan. NOAA 3 has dropped into recon mode. They are coming in on the northwest side of Fiona. Right now, they're cruising right about the 700 millibar level, which is right where they normally run at with a hurricane. So we'll start getting some information off the northwest to southeast pass, probably here in about the next 20 to 30 minutes. And I definitely do think this is going to be a very interesting first pass to see if Fiona's gotten any stronger.
I should also give a polite reminder to our social media team to actually post our stream on our social media right now. That would also be very helpful. Joining us also at this moment is Ethan, who is also a long-standing presenter here on our live streams, and you've also been watching Fiona very closely and those other systems, and I wonder what might pique your interest the most right now.
Well, it depends on what you mean by piquing my interest. I mean, do you mean like what I'm monitoring the most, probably?
I guess is
It's easily got to be 98L.
Oh gosh.
Not mainly because the potential that it has long range in the Gulf of Mexico. I know that a lot of the models are very keen on that, but I'm just monitoring 98L very closely because I, in particular, have family along the west coast of Florida, just north of Tampa. Their house, I think, is within a mile of the coastline, so they could be in the firing line. But that's just one thing I'm monitoring right now. Of course, we've also got a lot of things around the world, not just in the Atlantic. 2 areas of interest in the East Pac, and probably a few more in the West Pac as well. Busy times that we're in right now.
Very. I mean, we expect this in September, but it just sort of feels a little bit. I guess to me, it feels quite rushed in how it's just come on really quickly from 0 to 100 because we've had an extraordinary quiet period up until this point.
I would have to agree with that assessment, Nathan. I mean, normally the climatological peak is usually September 10th, and 10th, 11th, and 12th was pretty dead quiet for what we normally would see this time of year. So, yeah, all the basins firing up now in the second to third section of September. Definitely quite unusual, but, I mean, we are still pretty much in the peak part of the season.
And
yeah, I mean, I know that one thing that I was monitoring extremely closely is we look back, today's Tuesday, we look back on the models on Sunday, all the models had nothing, absolutely nothing out of 98L. And then the 0G GFS came in for Monday morning's run and had that big hurricane sweeping through the Caribbean into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Ever since that model run has come out, every single model has been determined that 98L is going to form. So that is just shocking that you could have nothing from a potential system, and then you could have models 12 hours later suggested that it could become a major hurricane.
The complete opposite to a few days ago.
There's going to be a lot of speculation still ahead of us about what exactly happens to that system. We're just trying to blow it up on our imagery now. It's that one down there at a very low latitude. You can see the beginnings, the formative stages of what might be that system now. Looked good earlier today, although it's really waned in the later hours. I'm sure it will come back again tomorrow, but it's headed for places like Trinidad and Tobago, which I believe have already launched some kind of preliminary warning. I can't remember what they were talking about, maybe a rain warning. And the Windward Islands do need to look out for this system.
Yeah, they do, Nathan. And this particular corridor has been really quiet most of this season. I know back July, August, when we had the whole Saharan air layer over the main development region, this particular corridor was still ripe and prime for tropical cyclone development. So for us to see something coming through this corridor in September, and this area's been pretty well untapped. I know Fiona went through the northern part of the main development region into the leewards, up through Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, but it really did not tap into the full potential of the ocean heat content and the other atmospheric dynamics in the Western, Central, and Eastern Caribbean. So, yeah, 98L is definitely going to be well worth watching over the next 5 to 6 days to see what it actually does.
Its biggest threat, as usual, in the Eastern and Central Caribbean will be wind shear. Wind shear is always high in that area, usually. I know in recent times it has. And it's just whether it overcomes that. But things can really ramp up very quickly when they end up in there. But we'll keep speculation on that to a minimum. I'm also conscious that our imagery mostly is looking at Fiona, and I don't want to confuse anyone thinking that Fiona's going to the Caribbean or the Gulf or anything like that, because it certainly isn't. It's curving northwards. Let's go and look at the National Hurricane Center forecast cone. And this is what they have in store. They're expecting a really powerful storm and a powerful extratropical transition as it approaches Atlantic Canada at the end of the week. They're calling for a post-tropical transition just before it reaches Nova Scotia, the eastern tip, and then a landfall there, and then moving through Newfoundland and Labrador.
And
in
what's
the weekend.
interesting with that last extratropical point there, Nathan, is National Hurricane Center, I think at the 11 o'clock advisory, still had it at 100 to 105 miles per hour. I think the last time we've seen a storm of that intensity impact Newfoundland as a post-tropical system would have been Dorian 2019.
Quite a different angle on that one, but this actually reminds me a little bit of Teddy as well, in that sense, because that was a powerful storm when it was moving through. I'm just going to check, actually. We ought to do some research and make graphics beforehand, but let me just look up strongest Nova Scotia landfalls.
Well, I think we had, Dorian 2019 at 100. Juan was Category 2 back in, I think, 2010 or 2012?
2003, that one. And Ginny in 1963. Those are all Category 2 tropical landfalls. But as for extratropical ones, I'm not sure.
I've got imagery up of the Atlantic Basin now, Nathan.
All right, then. Let's go and have a look at that.
Fiona looks very nice. I think they still have mezzo on it. They do.
Yep.
So there's a more high-definition loop. I think visible is still over Fiona, isn't it?
Well, it will have... It's going.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. But when it loads, there's the sun setting on Fiona. Beautiful imagery, by the way, of Ghost 16 here. But quite a interesting hurricane. Obviously, recon is in there. And I can also bring up the... Where is it? The forecast cone. No idea what it's got. There it is.
Yep. And Gaston as well.
Yeah, Gaston's over there. I'll get to Gaston here in a second. But I think they have... Oh, no, they don't. That's unfortunate. But one thing I want to point out real quick. I don't know where it is. I'm trying to find it. There it is. Look at the forecasted wind radii for the storm right now. Going to grow in size as it pushes north.
Definitely. I'm just trying to find some stuff out over here.
Well, I know that what I can say about Fiona real quick, just to buy you some time there, Nathan, is we've actually got 2 recon planes in and around Fiona right now. We have the lower level one, I think it's called NOAA 3, I think. Yeah. NOAA 3 is doing low-level reconnaissance right now. We have NOAA 9 doing some high-level reconnaissance right now over the storm. They're actually passing what looks to be just southeast of the eye right now at 43,000 feet. So they are very high up in the atmosphere. They've been doing some passes to the north of the storm right now, and they're just dipping south towards Hispaniola right now.
Yeah, and that's a good point you bring up, Ethan, with both recon planes. What they usually do is NOAA 3 being the low-level recon, that's primarily to see wind speeds, rain rates, intensity of that nature, while NOAA 9 kind of gets the upper-level atmosphere measurements, and they use both of those combined for the model guidance. So when we look at the NHC cone, that's where the NHC is getting their information from, is a combination of the low-level recon and the upper-level recon to see what the steering currents are in the different regions of the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what the NHC forecast peak-wise in their next forecast. I know that they've been having it peak around 140 miles per hour. I think they still have that. I think
Probably.
Let me just have a look. Yes, they still do at what looks to be midday on the. This isn't the 20th. I'm trying to think, but it's in 2 days from now that they have it peaking at 140 miles per hour. But it's going to be interesting to see how long this at that peak goes down or up, even, because if I pull up the best track here, you can see that this hurricane has been really steady in intensity. It gradually intensified, really rapidly intensified once it emerged off of Hispaniola up to 110 miles per hour just about 24 hours ago. And ever since then, it's only intensified really 5 miles per hour. And most of that intensification happened in the overnight hours. So really throughout the day today, it's held in intensity. So
really quite surprising, but consider, I mean, this is quite extraordinary. It is absolutely the recon observations that are holding this storm back, and a massive discrepancy between recon and satellite right now. ADT, the Advanced Dvorak Technique satellite imagery, is currently at 142 miles an hour.
Oh my goodness.
We will find out a little bit more on that, Nathan, because NOAA 3 is 27 nautical miles from the eye of Fiona. They're going to be probably doing a west to east pass into the eye and will probably go out the northeastern quadrant to get a measurement of those strongest winds. So they should be hitting the eye here probably about the next 10 to 12 minutes, and then they'll make that northeast pass from there.
Wow.
I don't know if they've done this or not, but let's switch the mesoimagery. I hope they still haven't changed it. Fantastic. Okay.
Just a reminder that just mentioned there the satellite estimates of 140 miles per hour right now. That is superseded by recon observations. They are much more closer to getting direct observations. They're still not fully direct observations because they have to do it at altitude, but they are much, much closer than what a satellite can tell you, obviously. So that's why we wait and wait with anticipation for their updates.
Yeah, speaking of those observations, Nathan, that 27 miles out from the eye, recon is already starting to get hurricane force flight level winds already.
20 miles.
27 from their last coordinate fix that I have.
Yeah, well, it's not a tiny storm, so I really would expect that, really. There certainly should be hurricane force winds about that distance away from the eye. Anyway, we've not had the chance to take any questions or anything to that effect yet, so if you've got any questions for us whilst we're on the air about any of these current systems, in any basin, we'll entertain them. We're mainly covering the Atlantic, but we will answer every question that we can. Start your message with Force 13 all in text in our chat section, and we'll take them live. There's a few that already came in from those who know the drill. Let's go for some of them. Normal Guy says, now that we have Gaston, will Hermine be on the way? Or with Hermine on the way, how does the Atlantic now compare to average at this time of year? The National Hurricane Center have a guide on their website, which I'm going to have to hunt for now to tell you the answer to that.
I'm hunting for it as well.
Climatology, okay, I think I got here before you. So usually by this point we're up to storm number 9, about to get storm number 10 in a couple of days, and Gaston is storm number 8. 8, correct?
7.
7. We had a depression. Oh no, we had a PTC that didn't form. And so, yeah, that complicates the numbering a little bit. And so Hermine would be 8. 7.
7.
Man,
which
I'm
the
confused.
average
7, yeah.
I'm just looking at this now. The average formation date for the 7th named storm is September 3rd, so we're still below average.
Yeah, 17 days behind, but I don't know. If this season's probably going to be backloaded, and I think we'll catch up.
Although it does appear, just looking at imagery of Gaston, it does appear that it's going to become the 4th hurricane of the season. And the average formation date for the 4th hurricane is September 16th, which was 4 days ago. And the average formation date of the fifth hurricane, which 98L probably will become a hurricane later down the line, that is September 28th. So that may be average in a few days or so.
Yeah, so making up for that. Something I've just thought of in my head. We know that I think it was 1961 that was, or 1960, one of them, that was a massive season, and it pretty much only started in September. And we're really looking at something quite similar here if this trend keeps up. Let's take
That was
some.
going right back to that.
Who knows? Maybe that also had a Modoki La Nina, which is what we've had this year, and that has really meant that absolutely everything is a complicated forecast, because we are, in terms of our configuration, in our climatological pattern right now, it's something that we have not witnessed in times where we've had accurate observations back to around 1984. So it's a wild card that we have this year, basically, where goodness knows what might happen next. Anyway, more comments. So Goat Gaming says, possibility of Fiona becoming a Category 5. I would say very minimal, but I would not say 0, Ethan.
I would.
I would not.
What percentages between Ethan and Nathan? What percentages are you giving that? Because that's
0.
one question that Nathan.
Probably about 2 or 3%. It's a low
So the
chance.
possibility there. So, guys, are we saying high range Cat 4?
Well, the NHC are forecasting mid-range, so if it... I don't know. If it catches up to its satellite appearance, that's 140 miles per hour right now.
I would.
But it isn't at the minute.
I would wait to get this recon passed before giving any forecast peak, because I really want to see what recon say for this storm whenever they go in and get the data. That's really what I'm eager to say. I think there's a chance that they might find a stronger storm, but if they find still just a 115 mile per hour hurricane, I'm going to be quite surprised, to be honest.
I'll be baffled. That would really throw into question, once again, how much we can rely on satellite observations.
I did see one person ask earlier, Nathan, that they're a bit shocked that we have Gaston at 60 miles per hour, and
that wasn't my call, but you had some say, I believe, Ethan.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the storm's imagery. I mean, it went from being a sheared mess to having earlier today it had its center mainly exposed on the southern side of the circulation, and now it's gone to having a eye of sorts in just a few hours, which is quite remarkable. I know that this imagery is pretty low res, so I'm just grabbing some imagery here from Levi Cowan's website, tropicaltidbits.com, by the way. And I mean, I'm not entirely sure if that's an eye or not, but it's very interesting. But the organization of the storm, regardless, does not suggest that this storm is within 40 miles per hour, though.
I don't know, it might... Let's have another look on the geocolor imagery. Here's a look at some geocolor imagery right now. I don't know what to say to you, Ethan, but on that latest imagery that you're showing on your viewer, it's sort of disappearing just a little bit in those last frames.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't go as high as our latest fix went with 60 miles per hour. I'd probably go at 50.
I thought you made the 60 call. Was it someone else?
No, that was someone else, yeah.
Oh, okay then. Well, there you have
I know that you haven't covered anything else, Nathan, so I just want us to go over the Eastern Pacific real quick, if you don't mind. Let's see if we can find the ghost of Madeline. Where is it?
Madeline.
There it is.
Yeah, it's there.
There's Madeline.
Ironically, it looks better than it did yesterday when it was sheared to bits.
Yeah, there's the NHC cone. Gonna head west and gonna die. Like all these pack systems do. But but you can see that there is both of these areas of interest back here. Both of these have a 20% chance of development, pretty low, but they could bring some heavy rainfall along portions of the Mexico coastline here and the mountainous regions, which could bring some impacts there. Going over into the West Pacific, we have, I forget its number all the time. What's the invest number over there in the West Pac?
94.
Thank you, 94W. Here it is. There's some imagery 94W. I can't get it on WSA3, unfortunately. Looking interesting, I'll say. Certainly trying its hardest to form. For some reason, our cyclone analyst team went with 70%, which I'd probably be down at 50% for this system right now. But what it's going to be interesting what's going to happen after this system, because you can see here's 94W. This system's going to shoot off towards the north, towards Japan. And something tries to form here in the Philippine Sea towards the 3 to 4 to 5 day period, and that eventually heads westward. Where is it going to go at what intensity? I can't really say, but I can say that there is at least some moderate confidence that something is going to happen once 94W departs here in the Philippine Sea. Right now, I'd probably give this general area a 40% chance of development right now in the next 5 days.
And we'll do a proper digest of the Western Pacific and everything out there in our tropical weather bulletin in an hour and a half. But the main focus in the meantime is obviously the Atlantic features, and we'll continue to take your comments and questions live. Here is once again a close-up look at Fiona, which is swiveling around there and appears to be moving almost due north by this point, and certainly has a wide and picturesque eye, although recon estimates aren't very flattering for the storm, and a massive discrepancy between their observations and satellite estimates. A question.
I think it's moving.
Go for it, Ethan.
I think it's moving ever so slightly west of due north, Nathan. But what I can say is recon passes Cape-In, and we've got some big news on Gaston, by the way.
Oh God. Which one to go first? Okay, Tim.
We did have that first recon pass of Fiona. We actually have 3 readings over 90 knots flight level, and the center fix, this is extrapolated, so this you could take with a grain of salt and a margin of error by 1 to 1.5 millibars. Recon found 950.1 millibars on their first pass.
Ooh.
950?
Yeah, that's extrapolated, so that could be 951.2.
Wow.
That's incredible. I'm really curious to hear what the drop zone is. Did they go out on the eastern side, Tim?
Looks like they just made a full circle around the eye. Looks like they're going towards the southwest at the moment, unless they're going to circle and try to get a good drop zone out of that. But yeah, that's just the extrapolated 950.1.
Now, you told me there was some big Gaston news.
Yes. I don't know if you could show my screen, Nathan, but...
Oh, boy.
Oh, my. So, a microwave pass there, clearly suggesting.
That's a full-blown eye wall there.
Wow.
100%.
Which I am completely baffled by this, because this was just designated as a tropical cyclone. Let's see.
2 hours ago.
7 hours ago?
2 hours ago. Yeah. Alright, I think the stream has re-established itself for some reason. It just dies and comes back. I can't do anything about that. We'll have to seek help. Tim, you wanted to go with something?
Yeah, we were actually discussing the ocean heat content on Gaston, and how the ocean heat content is like absolutely zero for where it's at. So it's highly unusual for us to have what could be a second potential, and I put emphasis, potential hurricane out in this region of the Atlantic. Because we had Danielle earlier this year, and the OHC wouldn't support a hurricane of of this magnitude if it actually does get upgraded based on the microwave imagery.
I don't think that they'll upgrade to hurricane solely based on microwave imagery. I mean, sure, that just suggests that it's a strong tropical storm, but I wouldn't go hurricane just alone on the microwave imagery.
I would hope the NAC wouldn't do that because that would be extremely irresponsible on their part.
Now, meanwhile, Fiona, though, is over much better oceanic heat content.
Oh, yeah. Fiona is down by the Turks and Caicos, and they easily have 100 to 125 kilojoules of ocean heat content where it's at. And then along its path, it's still going to be very favorable, anywhere between 50 to 75 up to 100 kilojoules. But I know the area of interest that Ethan is watching, 98L, you can just see that western, central, and east central Atlantic. That area is just primed for something to blow up. And as you did note, Nathan, that usually the central and eastern Atlantic is kind of the tropical storm graveyard. Usually nothing makes it through that area. There is a couple rare occasions, though. I do know Matthew formed out in this area, but the wind shear dynamics were a lot different when Matthew came through. We know Harvey came through this area, did get tore up before making out into the Western Caribbean, into the Gulf, which we know what happened with Harvey. So, yeah, 98L is going to be very interesting to watch as it does traverse through the Caribbean.
Well, I mean, Harvey was a different situation because Harvey degraded itself in the central Western Caribbean due to wind shear. But honestly, the last time that we had really a storm form near the Windward Islands and have potential to become a significant hurricane in the Western Caribbean and go across the whole Caribbean Sea east to west, or at least have the potential to. I honestly can't recall the last time that we had that. It's really like my years of talking tropical cyclones ever since Matthew in 2016. The Caribbean has been a graveyard, really.
I think Emily 05 did it, but I want to say we've had something more recent pull that off, though.
Yeah, I'll have to do some research. Yeah, I'm just going back in my mind here. I don't think any... I mean, Earl 2016 comes to mind. But I could have sworn that one formed in the Central Caribbean, didn't it?
A little bit further on, I think it was probably away for a good while, though.
Yeah, I think Nana was down in this area, but I think it formed further west in the Central Caribbean. I can't think of anything that has formed right in that corridor between Puerto Rico, Colombia, and the Windwards there. Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I've actually got our answer here. The last time that a storm formed out here in the Eastern Caribbean Sea and tracked east to west and was at least some point in here a hurricane at least, was actually, you're not going to believe this answer, Hurricane Felix back in 2007. It's been that long.
What about Dean?
Dean would be a more northerly example, but of course, this system isn't going to be anything like Dean or Felix. I mean, it could be, but it's not going to be intensity-wise. Track-wise, really beyond... If you were to draw a line from the Panama Canal area up towards Jamaica, if you were to draw a line between these, anything west of here, anything really within, including the Gulf of Mexico, the Western Caribbean Sea, anything in this area regarding this system is highly uncertain. Intensity, track, impacts, the whole, everything, entirely uncertain.
Well, in about, where are we? About an hour and a half when we do our tropical weather bulletin, we'll see what the 18Z GFS model makes of it and whether there's any differences to that forecast, whether there's any hints developing. In the meantime, keep your comments and questions coming in live. Share our stream if you want to help out our social media team. And yeah, go ahead.
We've got recon data now, and recon have found Cat 4 flight level winds, 117 knots, and SFMRs of 102 knots. This looks to support an intensity of 120 miles per hour for the storm now. And it looks like that recon have gotten 949.4 extrapolated, Tim.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a margin of error when you do from the extrapolated to the actual surface pressure. I remember one of our former members hinting that usually it's a 1.1 to 1.2 millibar. So 949, you said 949.5, be about
Around there.
950.7. Yeah, so about 950, it would be fairly reasonable, which this would definitely show signs that this powerful hurricane is still intensifying.
It's going to be interesting to see what side of the eye wall they went through. But I think regarding pressure, the big thing that we're going to have to wait for is drop zones. I see your
Yeah,
thing.
I'm not. Yeah, that's the thing, is I'm not seeing any drops on data as of yet.
Eastern
Do
side.
you have the raw data file? And just looking at the raw data file, last 6 data points that have just come in, and yeah, Ethan, you're right. Last 6 flight level: 114, 116, 115, 117. 116, 112, and then those SFMRs 102, 100 going down, and none of them are flagged. So we are definitely looking at flight level easily category 4. SFMRs would definitely support category 3, but this is on the eastern side of the eye wall. I'm really wanting to see them make this eastward pass, go to the north, and then come back down through the northeast.
Yeah, and I should point out that that this data that Recon just gotten, while yes, they did get Cat 4 flight level winds, those are at flight level. Those are 10,000 feet up in the atmosphere, so those are not representative of actual winds down at the ground.
But the SFMRs is usually what is more indicative, and those were getting Cat 3, 100 to 102 knots.
Yeah. When you do a formula, and when you blend that formula's results in with those SFMR's values, that blend supports 120 miles per hour for the storm. So, it does appear by this initial recon pass, I mean, flight level winds are up alone. Considerably from the previous passes. I mean, I know that I've been watching the recon passes for the storm very closely, the past few ones for previous recon flights, and they haven't gotten anywhere really near this. And so this storm does appear to be intensifying it once more.
We still have just over an hour of more observation time for recon flight passes before the National Hurricane Center are compelled to do their intermediate advisory, and they'll update that intensity in which way they see fit. Some questions. Is Fiona going to interact with a cold front, and is that going to make it a bad storm for Canada? What is it that's going to cause all this big mess that we're expecting?
Well, Fiona, I can pull up the National Hurricane Center forecast cone on my screen here, and I know that it's not going to seem like it here, but Fiona is going to make a very close pass to the west of Bermuda. National Hurricane Center forecasts it as a Category 4 weakening into Category 3 intensity. But that last major hurricane's point at 2 p.m. on Friday, really after that, it's going to make a very quick transition into a post-tropical cyclone. And that is going to be a big impact thing to Canada, because post-tropical cyclones tend to have a very big wind field. They tend to have those tropical storm force wind fields extend much farther out than your typical tropical cyclone would have them, and they also tend to move very quickly. And this area is going to be very mountainous, and typically when we look at hurricane impacts up here in Canada, typically they're 80 miles per hour and lower, not like the National Hurricane Center is forecasting with a point just northeast of I forget this island
Nova
nation
Scotia.
called Nova Scotia. Thank you. They have it just northeast of there with winds of 100 miles per hour, so it wouldn't surprise me if it's a little bit stronger before it makes landfall in northern Nova Scotia here. But weakening as it goes on in.
A question from Dorian, who says, is it possible for Fiona to do an eyewall replacement cycle? Of course it has done some already, but a next one, any signs of that?
Not sure on that, but
doesn't look like it to me.
Nah, but touching back on what Ethan was talking about with that front, I do have the GFS pulled up, Nathan, and I can kind of outline this front that they're alluding to here.
Mm-hmm. You can see it clearly there.
Yeah, it starts up. Obviously, the main low pressure itself is up here in the Labradors and does drape back across. Now, obviously, this is going to be bringing some rainy and stormy conditions to the east coast of the U.S. Later on this week. But what's interesting with it is as it does approach Fiona, the actual front actually pulls Fiona a little bit to the northwest. That's why we're seeing that bend north. And yeah, when's the last time we've seen a sub 930 extratropical system impact Nova Scotia?
I was trying to look for pressures earlier, and well, there was not much data. I haven't a clue. It's a really good question.
I mean, that's the GFS, and that's at 90 hours out. CMC hinting on that same front. You can see it draped over the northern part of New Brunswick back across the western Atlantic as it comes off the U.S. And it looks like it does this. It actually does the same thing, Nathan. This is what's incredible with fronts and steering currents is this front literally grabs Fiona and off of its northeast vector and pulls it almost northwest right into Nova Scotia. This is a little bit further south than what the GFS has, but pretty much every system, well, there the NavGem has it going up towards Prince Edward Island, does not forecast the front interaction to be as strong on Fiona, according to the NavGem. And the icon, looks like the icon is also has that northwestward pull, but it looks like it's a little bit later at about 96 hours out. So looks like most of the major models are in agreement. Yeah, this is going to hit Atlantic Canada, whether it hits Nova Scotia or up towards Prince Edward Island. I think that's the big toss-up, and its intensity looks to be pretty consistent. Most of them in between 928 up to 940.
Wow.
By the time it does get up into this area in about 4 days.
So there's model agreement.
There is pretty good confidence with it. Obviously, the NAGEM and ICON are into disagreement with the Euro and the GFS on how much this front coming through is going to pull on Fiona. But it is agreement that there is going to pull. It's just when and how hard is it's going to pull on Fiona once it gets up towards the Maritime Canada region the next 4 days.
We got to catch up with some questions. Here's some more. Well, actually, not that one. Let me just find some other ones. Well, I thought I had some just then. How fast is Gaston moving right now? Good question.
It's moving at 17 miles per hour, 15 knots.
17 miles per hour. That's the voice of Jose there, who is also with us. You're joining us from Florida?
Mm-hmm.
So you're probably the closest person to the storm out of the people that we've got here right now. I doubt you'll be seeing any impacts over there, but what are your thoughts on Fiona and the other systems?
Right now, what I'm surprised is that, like, now the looks like the Atlantic is starting to waken up. Well, it kind of has been, only for a little bit. But with Fiona, never thought they'll actually reach a major hurricane strength. Like wow. Right now, like I just say that there are going to be rip currents along the east coast of the United States. Right now, since I'm kind of not that close to Fiona, a little bit, there were kind of a bit of wind gusts, I should say, but not strong.
Yeah.
This question, considering my home location, Long Island, is it in the cone?
Oh no, Long Island's way out of the way of the cone.
Is it right? Okay.
Just looking back at that cone once again, and it is when you look at the grand scheme of things, it is rather a thin cone until you get to the later part of it, where it really broadens out in those later parts of that forecast. Although the shape also increases because of the map type, because of course when you get into the higher latitudes, those degrees east to west actually constitute less miles than it is at the lower latitudes. That's another reason why that cone expands as much as it does towards the end there. But once again, there it is, a dangerous storm, and possibly more on the way. Whilst we've got it, there's some key messages. Just to mention, the heavy rains will continue to impact the Turks and Caicos through this evening, with continued life-threatening flooding. Localized additional flash and urban flooding is possible in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. Hurricane conditions affecting portions of the Turks and Caicos Islands, whilst tropical storm conditions should affect portions of southeastern Bahamas during the next few hours. Tropical storm conditions possible on Bermuda by late Thursday. And then, of course, for Atlantic Canada, a powerful hurricane-force cyclone late Friday and Saturday, and could produce significant impacts from high winds, storm surge, and heavy rainfall. Even if it turns post-tropical, storm surge will still be potentially a big factor. Interest in these areas should closely monitor the progress of Fiona and updates to the forecast. But this is the one I wanted to show you, the sort of the percentage chances, the strike probabilities, and you can also see Gaston's little cone there as well for the Azores, part of which are under around a 50% chance of tropical storm force winds. So I imagine soon that might prompt tropical storm watches at the very least there as well. But looking further west at Fiona, you can see those high chances already for parts of eastern Nova Scotia, western Newfoundland, and along the coast of Labrador as well. So those chances going up, of course, as the storm draws closer. Very interesting to see. Some more comments, let's try and get to them right now. I know a lot came in the last 20 minutes or so. We had a very chatty team. I didn't really want to stop their flow. Could Fiona hit St. John in New Brunswick? It's one of the locations that we have on the bottom bar when we go to it every so often. So St. John is in around I think it was about 15% chance of tropical storm force winds, and you'll get, I think it was something like 2 or 3 inches of rain. Of course, the forecast cone could still shift a little bit westwards, so keep watching for that. It could still get, those forecasts could increase. The chance of formation on 98L, very high chance by most people's estimates. I think our team are running with 80% right now, which I think is what the National Hurricane Center have. They certainly did earlier today.
We're giving an 80 in the next 5 days.
Yep, 80 in the next 5 days. So very high chances. What impacts could 98L do to the US? Long way out, but it could be a substantial hurricane, major hurricane even, in the Gulf of Mexico. Models have been suggesting it, but there's still a long way to go and a lot of barriers for that potential storm to go through before we can say anything with certainty.
I don't know if the team has talked about it, but right now Bermuda is under a tropical storm watch right now.
Yep, that was issued earlier on today. Tropical storm watch for Bermuda at this time. Canadian says, I'll be starting preparations for Fiona tomorrow, and do you think this one could possibly hit a historic one for Canada? I think so, for that area. When we think about past storms, it's quite tough to think about them.
With that.
Maybe something like, which one was it? Was it Earl or Igor in 2010? Possibly both. They really hit that area hard as well. So, it could be something like that. Could even be worse than that if the current forecast possibly goes to plan. I wouldn't take any chances with this if in about 2 or 3 days the forecast sticks and it still remains as strong as it is. I wouldn't take any chances. What impacts are on the southern Bahamas? Question mark. You can see on this satellite imagery that the easternmost islands of the Bahamas are still inside the storm's main influence. I'm just trying to figure out which islands they are. Mayaguana is the one that's closest to the center of the storm. They're probably getting tropical storm force winds, definitely, maybe even hurricane force gusts. Ragged, not Ragged, I get them mixed up. Crooked Island and Acklins, they could be getting tropical storm force winds right now, but they are a little bit further away, and a fair amount of rain. Great Inagua is getting away from the storm now as well. Things will start to clear up there in a couple of hours probably over there. And for areas further north that haven't really seen anything yet, San Salvador Island might get a little bit of the edge of the storm in a couple of hours. I'm not sure you'll get much further out than that. I think that will probably be it for the Bahamas. And if you have any more comments or questions, start your message with Force 13 all in text. And Ben just did that. What are the impacts for Nova Scotia? They could potentially be very high. One thing that we can say for Nova Scotia, though, if the cone happens as it is, that the western side of the storm is the weaker side, and that is always the case, just because of the way storms move with the counterclockwise circulations. That means that when a storm is moving northwards particularly, the movement of the storm counteracts the storm's winds a little bit, and conversely on the eastern side that it amplifies those winds a little bit more. So the western side is usually weaker, but not to a great extent. Usually, of course, when if we get radar when it moves closer to Canada, we might be able to examine exactly what's happening, and it will be turning post-tropical, so it will of course have a much wider wind field. Loads of questions coming in after my call out there. Why is Fiona not strengthening today? Good question. It is strengthening a little bit now. We've seen on those recon passes, but it is a very good question. Satellite estimates suggest winds of probably around 140 miles per hour, but it isn't. Recon, which is much more accurate, currently suggesting winds of maybe 120 miles per hour. And that is quite a big difference. And the Fiona's had this great appearance for quite a while, with the eye very open all day today. So it must only be a matter of time for the winds to catch up to the satellite appearance, assuming that it maintains such a nice appearance. Do we think, there's two questions that we can sort of bring into one there. Do we think that Gaston could become a hurricane, and why does it have an eye? Well, it's potentially stunned a few storm trackers today. There it is with its potential eye. Well, it is an eye appearing, which was verified by a microwave pass earlier. There is an eye developing inside Gaston, and it is certainly looking much better on that imagery. So it's headed for hurricane status. It's one of these cyclones that just bomb out of the blue at these higher latitudes, probably taking advantage of warmer than usual sea surface temperatures.
Just wondering, what's the distance between the two systems?
It is quite a fair distance from eye to eye. It is pretty much 3,000 kilometers on the nose, which in miles is somewhere near 2,000, so it's quite a distance.
1,850 miles. I think pretty close.
Fascinating.
Yes. But Fiona is looking a lot more healthier to what it was when it hit Puerto Rico, and it's just
I would
nothing
say,
stopping
David,
it now.
that Fiona is going to be very scary once it does get further down the line towards maritime Canada. I'm not sure if you can bring this up, Nathan, but I do have the 18Z multi-models that we normally use to compare all the models, and we usually use them on our storm updates. And
I've lost it, sorry. We'll be able to take a look at that in our next hour.
okay, yeah, I'll save it for then. But yeah, the model consensus going to the 23rd and 24th is very scary. I don't think I have seen a hurricane transition to an extratropical system and be still this powerful. So that'll be I'll be glad to showcase that on next hour.
More comments. Mega Toast says, does this storm have a large wind field or a pretty small one? I assume you're referring to Fiona. Its wind field will certainly expand quite a bit later on. As of right now, let me just get this, wind field is currently 130 nautical miles northeast and southeast, and 120 northwest, 80 southwest. So it's a pretty average size for a hurricane, and actually maybe a little bit on the small side for one of this strength. Did Fiona go through an eye wall replacement cycle earlier today? I can't remember when it ended, but it would have been a while back now. And what do you think of the impacts will be on the UK, if any? Fiona's not going there, it's going to go towards Canada, unless you mean Gaston, which is probably too early to tell right now. We're taking a short break here. We'll be back in a few minutes with our next hour of coverage on these Atlantic systems. Our live coverage will continue in a moment. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. And this is the first one. Nope. Well, that was Gaston the Cat here. That was our Sunday's intro. Well, that's not what we're doing tonight, definitely not. And that happens to include Gaston the Cat, which is one of our old characters from some of our funnier times on our entertainment side of things. Anyway, we're back on Force 13 Live, covering a much more serious situation, and that is Hurricane Fiona and Tropical Storm Gaston, which is intensifying quite substantially over the main part, or further east over the Northern Atlantic Ocean. My name is Nathan Foy. Unfortunately, I clicked a wrong button when it shouldn't have been that one, but it was supposed to be the other one, but we'll gloss over that. I'm joined once again by my team. This hour we have David, Tim and Jose, and we'll talk to them in just a moment. Hurricane warnings are still in effect for the Turks and Caicos Islands, with the National Hurricane Center updating at the end of the hour. We'll see if they have a higher intensity for the storm. And a tropical storm watch is in effect right now for Bermuda. Tropical Storm Gaston is currently at 60 miles per hour according to our estimates, so the National Hurricane Center have it much lower at 40 miles per hour. But it's developing an eye already, and could even be on the cusp of reaching hurricane status. We just don't have any direct observations, unfortunately, so it is all guesswork. We're mainly covering Fiona and Gaston, with a lot of emphasis as well on Invest 98L, which is the one that might develop near the Caribbean Sea and enter the Eastern Caribbean soon. To talk about that right now, and we'll first go to Timothy, who was going to talk about the some of the intricacies regarding Hurricane Fiona's forecast track. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Nathan. This is the multi-model diagnostic. It's the 18Z run. Most of our viewers are familiar with this. We usually run this on a lot of our storm updates, and what has me really concerned, Nathan, is we were looking at the GFS and the other models during our last hour of coverage, and most of them are bringing this down to the 930s, high 920s around the 23rd and 24th of September. What makes that interesting is the intensity on these models has it trending upward around that same time, along with the shear going through the reef and the sea surface temperatures dropping to almost less than optimal cyclogenesis temperatures, which leads me to think that not only is Fiona potentially going to turn extratropical, but the front that it's going to interact with is going to cause some very strong baroclinic forcing on Fiona. And if we're looking at some of the wind potentials, GFS thinking this could still be a Category 3 equivalent, Euro, HMON, and HWARF, thinking this could be a Category 4 equivalent as it gets up towards Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and the Labradors on the 24th. So even with this being an extratropical system, this is going to be a very scary system for maritime Canada.
Yep, that is really what we're looking at. You can get similar graphics for Gaston and probably 98L as well there, Tim, so I don't know if you could grab a hold of those, but in the meantime we'll take a look at the latest imagery. This is the mesoscale infrared enhanced imagery on Hurricane Fiona right now. The eye looking pretty good when you look at it there, although getting a little bit lopsided in those later frames and gets a little bit difficult trying to establish exactly the storm's direction right now. Let me just grab a different kind of imagery that I'm more familiar with getting temperatures from, just see if we can get establish possibly an eye temperature from this, because that's quite an interesting way of can sometimes be useful in establishing a storm's intensity estimate. Just eyeballing it, but I would say that the the temperature, pardon me, the temperature of the eye in there right now is probably in the double digits positive temperatures, so certainly a sign of a rather intense storm. And satellite imagery really has it. You know, when you don't have any observations inside it like recon, you wouldn't think twice about calling this a category 4, and yet the recon planes have only just established possibly 120 mile per hour winds. But
Well,
get
Nathan,
this,
we're going to have more coming in because Recon's getting ready to make the big pass, that northeast to southwest pass, here in about the next 20 minutes.
so that could be a real indicator there, whatever happens in that one. It's got to be stronger than 120 miles per hour at this point with the way the satellite is looking. Latest satellite estimates right now on ADT have 145 miles per hour, and yet it is still only maybe 120 according to recon, which supersedes satellite imagery. Right now we're also joined by Christian, and I'll open the floor up to you because I'm sure you wanted to input your thoughts right now.
Yes. Well, let's just say, obviously, I've been focusing on other things throughout the past few days, and I come back for just like 5 minutes, and I find out, oh my god, what the heck's happened to Fiona? And yeah, like what is it, like 115,959, and I also find out that we also have Gaston the cat as well.
No, stop it. Yes.
You had to, didn't you?
We do have Gaston active as well. There it is on the geocolor satellite imagery, how it developed there, moving northeastwards. I think it was quoted at around 17 miles per hour, and decent looking. Microwave eye was confirmed about an hour ago, and now we're seeing it on satellite as well. Much stronger than what the National Hurricane Center have. Surely they're calling it 40 miles per hour right now, and I imagine they'll be bumping it up quite a lot of their next advisory, which unfortunately in this area is only going to be every 6 hours, so we won't get another update on that for 4 more hours, at which point we might start to see tropical storm watches for the Azores as well, maybe. In the meantime, let's see if we can get some more comments and questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. But in the meantime, hold on. Is Turks and Caicos getting major hurricane force winds? I'm not sure if they were. It would have been close. I don't know, honestly. I don't know if they would have done or not. Let's just check back through that imagery again and see just how close it moved to those islands. Yeah, I reckon that might have been quite possible, actually. I think this is out of date now, if we can just refresh that imagery. So there's the new imagery with how it's looking going into nightfall as well. Yeah, it did go very close to Turks and Caicos. I don't think we could rule out major hurricane force winds. So we'll be hearing from Recon shortly. Well, in the next 20 minutes we heard about any new changes to Fiona. But we're just quite baffled here right now with the massive discrepancy that there is between the storms, between Recon's estimate of the storm and what satellite is suggesting. When you look at that satellite imagery once again, a lot of black areas there. That's minus 70-degree cloud tops, a very warm eye temperature, possibly in the higher double digits actually, surrounded by a wall there, really blowing up those outer bands, spiraling around there on the eastern side. And when you think back to it, this storm may have had the chance to intensify more before it reached Puerto Rico when you look at it now, and perhaps we should be a little bit thankful that it was only at moderate category 1 when it moved past Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, but of course it did dump a huge amount of rain. Right now it's a Category 3, latest 115 miles per hour, pressure of 959 millibars, although we know that Recon have got much lower pressures now, possibly suggesting 950, and probably higher winds. We'll have their update when they produce it within the next hour.
And Nathan, I was able to scour those other two models on Gaston and 98L.
All right, let's go.
All right, so the first one, once we do have it up on the screen, is Gaston. Obviously, RAM not identifying it as Gaston. They have it as Tropical Storm 8 at the time that initialized. And most of the models, I would say, are pretty far behind if Gaston is actually as strong as our team is thinking it is. Most of them don't even bring this above hurricane status, not even the ship's model, which would be probably the strongest outlier, doesn't even bring it to hurricane force, right around 60 knots.
I just want to bring attention to those sea surface temperatures for a moment there. Are they saying that this storm's only had a brief period of 26 and then it's expected to shortly fall below that 26-degree threshold in the coming hours?
Looks like it's going to have about another 12 to 18 hours of ambient temperatures. GFS hinting to about maybe 6Z tomorrow morning. HMON a little bit bullish about the same way, about 6Z. HWRF actually drops it a little bit quicker, but probably about another 12 to 18 hours tops for what would be considered ambient sea surface temperatures for cyclogenesis. Normally right around 25, 26 degrees Celsius is usually the bare minimum that we would normally see for a tropical cyclone to develop. Obviously, there are those rare occasions where we have seen them form in 24, 23, but there's usually some other factors that do help contribute to a tropical cyclone developing in those lower temperatures, usually lower wind shear and some other influences. Obviously, wind shear right now, fairly decent at 15 knots, and it's going to stay fairly decent for about another 12 to 18 hours when those sea surface temperatures are going to drop, and the shear is going to jump to about 20 knots, maybe 25 knots going into tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, it doesn't have a huge amount of time.
Now, that is Gaston, and then 98L.
Well, this is what a lot of people will be interested in seeing.
Oh
Yeah,
my.
98L is rather interesting right now. Obviously, wind shear as of the 12Z run anywhere between 15 and 25 knots, depending on which model you go with. HMON sticking 25. GFS and HWRF are at about 15 knots. Sea surface temperatures are piping hot, 29 and a half degree waters in that area. And I think I still have...
It's going to be on a rocky road with wind shear, though.
Yeah, wind shear is going to be the big concern. Obviously, entering the Eastern Caribbean, that is called the Tropical Storm Graveyard for a reason, as most of them entering that area do die off. But HMON and GFS thinking that it could become a tropical storm and actually maintain minimal tropical storm status as it gets through the Central Caribbean. Ship's model thinking it could become a hurricane in the next 5 days. So there is some model support that if this does develop, could be Hermine. That would be the next name on the list. But that's probably not for another 18 to 24 hours down the road.
Naughty Tim there, pre-naming. Anyway, there is the disturbance.
I did emphasize that would be the next name on the list. I'm not saying that it is going to be that, but the models are hinting at that.
Yeah, sure. The disturbance there visible on this imagery, although it's really degraded in the last few hours, but I imagine that convection will start to spurt up again shortly. So really we're looking at mainly Trinidad and Tobago and also towards Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines possibly getting some significant rainfall, maybe up to 4 or 5 inches possibly out of this early stage of the storm, even if it doesn't develop prior to the Caribbean Sea. we could be looking at those storms. And as someone just mentioned, they're being shredded by Fiona, and that is predominantly what will be producing that wind shear.
I have a question for you.
Yep, go ahead.
Back to Fiona. What would
Yep.
you say the eye temperature is?
I was looking before, and I can't get an accurate depiction whilst I'm on the air because I'm too busy, but it would look to me as though it's probably around 15 degrees Celsius.
14 Celsius?
Yeah, it could be.
All right. Thank you.
About 15 degrees. Decent temperature when we're trying to make satellite estimates, but let's stress once again that with recon inside the storm right now, those satellite estimates are pretty much worthless, with recon taking precedent at least up until a few hours after they make their observations, and then you might want to trust satellite a little more again. But there it is right now on the latest enhanced satellite imagery, updating all the time. I'm not sure whether this rapid scan, sometimes they do it 2 images per minute, which is 1 image every half minute. Sometimes it's every 1 minute, sometimes it's every 30 seconds. Right now they are doing every minute on the rapid scan. But it's, I mean, those who remember the olden days, when I was starting out, we were still looking at, in the final days really, of looking at 30-minutely satellite imagery.
30 minutes.
1 image every 30 minutes, and now
How far technology's come.
15 years later,
Yes.
we have 1 a minute, if not more, which really helps us out in determining what's actually going on down there. Right then, let's see if we have some more comments and questions here. Do you think the storm near the Lesser Antilles will make landfall as a major hurricane for the 3rd year in a row? 3rd year in a row? What? Landfall as a major hurricane for the 3rd year in a row? Where?
Well, I'm guessing you had
Anywhere?
Iota, Ida. I'm guessing anywhere. Iota, Ida, and something else. I don't know.
Well, Dorian.
Dorian, 4 years.
Oh, it would be. Well, so, back to the question. Basically, whether it will make a major hurricane landfall, I think the chances are quite significant. Certainly much later on in the forecast when it gets to the Western Caribbean. In the meantime, Canadian says, has any other cyclone done something similar to what the models are saying about Fiona? Because a 930 millibar or lower is starting to scare me. Well, it sounds very low to me. It probably won't be quite that low. I think that's the GFS going a little bit overkill. But still, we could be seeing 930s. So it definitely shows that Fiona will not be a storm to mess about with when it reaches Canada. With that very low pressure, that would be a recipe for disaster for storm surge, heavy rainfall, but of course strong winds up to and possibly over 100 miles per hour, at least in gusts. What does the GFS say about the area of interest off of Africa? I think it's quite non-committed at the moment. Sort of develops it into a weak cyclone. Other models are taking it stronger, though. I think the CMC being a big advocate, but even the ECMWF, I think, has it. So be on the lookout for that one. If Fiona has intensified quicker than expected, what could we expect that to change the future path? I think I get the question. So if it intensifies more than expected, that would probably, at this point in time, probably won't really matter very much. In the short term, maybe it would move a slight bit faster and a little bit further east. But once it turns northeasterly, I really don't think it will have much of a factor at all.
All right, Nathan, we have an update on Recon. They have just made their northeastern pass. The data is starting to come in. I will have that here in a couple minutes for you.
Very good. And more comments here. Electro Bro says it's funny how Environment Canada put out tropical storm statements for Atlantic Canada before Bermuda got their watch. It's quite curious, although Canada, I suppose, is quite a bigger target. Is it possible that 97L could impact the Carolinas? Well, that one is Gaston. I assume you might mean 98L. And that is, once again, very early to figure out whether it might get there or not. A direct landfall, probably not, but it could move through as remnants after making landfall on the Gulf Coast. That's still 2 weeks out, though, so we're quite away.
Okay, Nathan, we do have some of the recon data, and this is rather concerning. We have a flight level 120 knots off the Northeast Pass. It's one single data point. I'm going to put emphasis. It is one single data point, but we do have at least 6 or 7 data points that are over 105 knots, 3 that are over 110, and 1 that is over 120 knots. SFMRs across that same area coming in between 85 and 106 knots. So this is easily 120 miles an hour at the surface. I'm not sure what the forecaster on NOAA 3 is going to do with those 110 to 120 flight level winds.
Very impressive. Very impressive readings.
Yeah, and what were those values in miles an hour? I'm not very well versed in my
120 knots would translate to, I believe, 140 or 145 miles an hour.
Oh, okay.
Keep in mind that is at flight level, that is 10,000 feet up in the air.
Okay.
And that's probably not 1 minute sustained either, is it?
No, that was a 30-second reading.
Okay.
30 second, yeah. But still signs that the storm is strengthening. Here's a wide shot of the Atlantic right now, and for the first time you can see both current storms, Fiona and Gaston, there on the imagery. Fiona on the left, well, near the centre of the screen, quite obvious to see. Gaston right up there on the right-hand side. It will never have as deep cloud tops up there. There's less energy, the sea surface temperatures are lower. And so you won't see as much action, but it could still get as strong. Well, not as strong as Fiona, of course, but hypothetically, storms could still get to Category 3 at that latitude. Gaston will probably get, the way it's going, it could be making a run for hurricane status. Certainly looking very impressive on satellite imagery. And we'll get that closer up view again on Gaston. There it is on the geocolor. And the microwave pass was a bit of a shock to the meteorological community when it showed a quite well-defined eye structure. Not looking quite as good on those latest frames though. So maybe it could be a fleeting feature. But certainly it would appear that it's stronger than 40 miles per hour, which is what the National Hurricane Center have went with at 5 p.m. AST. And their next update isn't until 11, which is 3.5 hours away, unless they decide to do a special advisory if it strengthens so much. We'll see what they think. Also to note that in about an hour, I think, maybe longer actually, maybe a couple of hours, there will be a new ASCAP pass over Gaston as well. Of course, if it's stronger than 60 miles per hour, then it will be pretty useless. But I guess that will be what will really tell us the estimated wind. What I'm hearing from comments is that it is still 951 millibars extrapolated. Fiona?
We are trying to get some of the dropsonde data in. Their first pass, they did get 953 at the surface with a 3-knot wind.
Okay.
The latest data has not come in yet. Extrapolated off of the last pass, and I still don't think they've completed this pass. Actually, yes, they have. Take a look at the data. Extrapolated. Oh, my. 947.4.
Oh my.
So, taking a margin of error, we could be looking at this being 948.5. But I do want to see what that drops on gets when it does come through there. But that would be roughly.
Strengthening.
I'm
Yeah,
trying to figure out
that's-
the extrapolated rate right quick. Give me a minute. I'll actually have that number for you here in a minute, Nathan.
Probably went 2 millibars in the last hour.
That's what I'm thinking. Let's see here. 22, 24.
Take a few comments here. Super says hello. Nice to see you once again. Do you think the NHC might increase the eventual peak intensity? Maybe. They probably won't increase it much more though. Tropical Storm Altony Bronze says there was a small rotating front next to New England. There is a front there. That's for sure. Should I be worried still on the East Coast? Says SC Jalen Devon. US East Coast is not currently at risk, but the Canadian Maritimes will get quite a battering from Fiona eventually.
Not to
Nathan.
mention that Bermuda's got something out, watch-wise.
Yes.
All right, Nathan did crunch the numbers on that. From their first to second pass, 1.7 millibar drop in 54 minutes.
So we may as well call it 2 per hour.
Just about. That is extrapolated. I'm definitely wanting to see what that drops on gets when it goes through there. And actually, we've got that drops on data.
Oh,
Oh,
952 with a 10 knot wind would bring it down to 951.
it's making progress, slowly but surely.
And Recon is not messing around. They're going right back out the northeast.
Yeah,
oh,
wow. Can't be easy to do that whole thing at night either.
absolutely.
This is why NOAA puts billions of dollars into the reconnaissance program. Each crew does have, I believe, at least a crew of 7 with them. You do have one pilot, one navigator, one that is keeping an eye on the instruments, and at least one onboard meteorologist with 2 or 3 other crew members. So there is at least a crew of 5 to 7 on each flight. And that onboard met has probably the toughest job during that entire flight, besides the pilot keeping them alive, is interpreting that data and getting that information relayed back to the National Hurricane Center.
Cool Creeper Ryan says that they have a question. What do we think of Invest 98L, and could it be a threat to the Gulf Coast later? And thanks for tuning in tonight. Well, 98L I think is a tangible threat to the Gulf Coast, but it is still long range, and it's something that we shouldn't really be raising serious alarms about until we know more, which is still going to be around 5 days away, if not more. So we'll just have to keep watching it until then. Let's see if there's some more comments. A few thank you messages there, which is always nice. And we do our best. Sometimes it can be quite difficult. We all have our own schedules to deal with as well. So it can sometimes get testing. We try to be here as much as we can. We try to spread our resources, which are quite limited, as much as possible as well, to keep things useful. We time our streams as much to perfection as we can so that we can broadcast to as many people. Produce that next update, so might be hanging on for a little bit before we start our tropical weather bulletin hour. In the meantime, we're just mainly sitting around waiting for recon data. Of course, they won't be doing another pass for a little while now. They're moving out northeastwards back through the northeastern quadrant, core of the storm, the area of maximum winds. And another comment coming in there. What's our views on the impact on Trinidad and the Windward Islands? Once again, a question regarding 98L. Once again, you'll see it just right on the very bottom of that screen there, hugging the bottom bar. Just a little system. There's not much to it yet. But it could be a significant rain threat. Could be 4, maybe 5 inches of rain for some of those Windward Islands. Whether we get tropical storm conditions there, I would at the moment doubt. But you don't know. Things could happen quickly. They can spin up very quickly, as we saw with Gaston. There it is once again. The other storm that we're currently tracking. But that is currently not affecting any land areas, but could threaten the Azores later on. Another comment. Kenny Frags says, my cousin lives in Mayaguana, which is next to the Turks and Caicos. Should I be worried? That is the closest island to the centre of Fiona in the Bahamas at this moment. And you can see it displayed on this map, the rather thin-shaped island that's in the southwestern side of the storm there. I imagine they'll be getting some pretty decent rain rates at this moment in time. Winds probably into the moderate, maybe even high tropical storm range. But hopefully it shouldn't be too crazy. Certainly compared to the Turks and Caicos, which I'm not sure how things went there, because the storm pretty much went directly over Coburn and was pretty much a Category 3 at that point. So I'm not sure what the news might be on Turks and Caicos. Still looking at that satellite, and the eye shrinking a little bit when you look at it there. It's just trying to improve on its roundness. That takes time. But I really think it is showing itself up. The gaps, the apparent gaps on the satellite imagery appear to be closing up. The radius of colder cloud tops in the -70s is increasing, as is the coverage around the circumference of the eye. So once again, it's looking like we're getting an intensifying storm. Recon supporting that with the data that they're getting. Pressure's gradually falling. But still, this massive discrepancy that we have between the recon flight and the satellite estimates, which are now suggesting 145 miles per hour. Of course it isn't. It is much weaker than that. But there is a big discrepancy between satellite and the observations. Of course, observational data from recon takes precedent. Otherwise they wouldn't be sending those planes in. It would be a waste of time. And they gather lots of useful information regarding the storm. Back to the National Hurricane Centre's forecast cone. Just to remind everyone of the situation that we currently have with us right now. Fiona with 115 mile/hour winds at the last update, moving north-northwest at 8. Expected to turn northwards shortly and then gradually turn northeastwards. Bermuda with a tropical storm watch. Major hurricane all the way up until its extratropical transition on Friday expected, and then it will still be a Category 2 force winds by the time it moves into eastern Nova Scotia on Saturday. When they update for the intermediate advisory, the cone won't change. They only update the cone when they do their full advisories, the next of which will be at 11 PM Eastern Daylight Time, as they've styled it there in their update. They try to do the time zone that's local to the area. That's why we saw Atlantic Standard Time previously. Now it's switched to Eastern, whilst it's in that location west of 70 degrees. And we'll wait on that update and see what they say. Do you think they'll fit in another pass before the update?
You never know.
They should be able to. I mean, they did go right back out the northeastern quadrant. We might get one more pass before the National Hurricane Center has to make their decision with their intermediate advisory.
Where did they take off from?
I want to say they probably would have taken off from Biloxi. That's normally where most of their fleet is at, unless they move them down to St. Croix for long range reconnaissance. Usually they do that if it's anything 5 or 60 degrees west.
So they've still got time to do a couple more runs.
Yeah, No 3 just got in right a couple minutes before we went live, so they definitely have plenty of fuel and plenty of time to get as many passes in as they can. They'll probably use that data for not only the 8 o'clock advisory, but maybe the 11 as well, depending how long NOAA 3 stays out in the storm.
Some questions again. Would Gaston interact with any fronts? I've not really been focusing on Gaston very much. What is it up to? Let me just check a model run and see whether there's a frontal. Well, the reason why it will stall near the Azores is because of a blocking high pressure ridge to its northeast, and it's really blocking the hell out of it. And really it ends up waiting for Fiona, and then they both move north together, it seems, in tandem with each other almost. And Gaston finally makes it around this strong high pressure.
Yeah, we can look at the models on all of that here in a minute, Nathan. We do have some more recon on that northeastern pass. They went right back out that northeastern side, and we've got a pretty good chunk of data points. Definitely supporting Category 3 winds, 106, 105 knots. We do have only one data point of 112 knots flight level, so I'm thinking that 120 that we saw when they first went in might have been a gust. That 112 does seem to be a little bit more reasonable and more consistent, especially with the SFMR data coming right around 90 to 95 knots. So
yeah, it sounds anomalous.
So 120, maybe 125 would probably be the highest I could see the NHC going. Probably 125, 950 or 951 if I actually had to speculate for the 8 o'clock update.
You think they might go to 125?
That would be the highest. I could see 120 probably being more reasonable, considering they were at 115 last advisory. But 120 would probably be the most extreme. 125 if they really, really wanted to push it.
More questions here. Do we have a forecast for 98L? I mean, not particularly. It's quite a tough one to gauge.
We do have the models.
We will check models properly in our tropical weather bulletin hour.
Right.
So, going to get Tim to hold his horses there. And why does the tail of Fiona have such cold cloud tops? Have you noticed that recently? The eastern side, away from the centre, blowing up some very high cloud tops, even 1 or 2 areas into the minus 80s there.
Honestly, Nathan, that is a feature we've seen on some of these stronger tropical cyclones, especially here in the Atlantic, where they get this moat of convection on the eastern side, and I'm not sure if it actually directly influences the structure of the hurricane, but this is a phenomenon that we've seen in a few storms of this magnitude.
Jake wants to know that if it does intensify to a Category 5, would it start a new streak? Oh, goodness knows. I mean, there's... we don't usually get streaks, if you mean one after one. Unless you mean yearly streaks. And those are pretty random as well, to be honest. We can't really call it. Fiona shouldn't become a Category 5.
It's not in the forecast. It's fairly unlikely. Obviously...
Very unlikely.
The last 2 years, obviously, we had... in reanalysis, we haven't had any Category 5s since Dorian, I believe, if someone want to correct me on that. However, operationally, technically, Iota sort of did reach that threshold, but like I said, it got reanalyzed back down to 155, which is Category 4.
But it's more about the locations of these storms. Dorian being over the northern Bahamas, obviously. This one would be quite a little bit further out. People make arguments about Lorenzo. I mean, it was at least 155 miles per hour.
Same with Iota as well.
Which I still hang
Iota
on
was
to.
really...
And I would say there's nothing stopping Fiona getting to borderline Category 5. I really don't think there's anything stopping it. But it has to be quite quick if it was going to do that. And
and sorry, to add on to your location bit as well, Iota was really far south.
Yeah, you get Category 5s there. It's
You
not
do,
completely...
It's not out of the picture, absolutely. But I want to say it's rare, but it does happen.
Actually, I don't think so, Christian. I mean, when you start talking mid-late October, early November storms, the Southwest Caribbean, where we saw Iota at, is usually climatologically right where we would expect them, and then right up into the Gulf, and obviously along the East Coast U.S. with the Gulf Stream. So a low-latitude system for that time of year is not unusual.
Okay, I stand corrected in that case, yeah. I'm still fairly new to this, you guys know that.
Oh, not a problem. Over here.
But as a general rule, Category 5s are pretty rare in the Atlantic. I mean, when you talk about the amount of storms we get and how many actually become a Category 5, it's a very low proportion. David?
I mean,
when we look at Fiona, I'm looking at the satellite imagery that you're providing, the Gaston. We know, going back in time when Fiona was down Puerto Rico, we saw it tracking west, then it, I think, adopted a northwest track. And we look at Fiona now, and Gaston, are you surprised at how that system has developed over the last 12, 18 hours?
Gaston?
I'm surprised.
Well, yeah, no one was expecting Gaston to be potentially as strong as it is. It'll be interesting to see what the National Hurricane Center think. But it's certainly showing quite an impressive structure on satellite. In fact, I've not checked ADT on that either, and they are actually only at 35 knots, so I'm surprised by that. But it had a microwave eye, but we'll get some more conclusive news soon from ASCAT, although I think when it comes out we'll have gone off the air by then.
Are we saying it could reach hurricane status, or I think you mentioned that the window would be a lot smaller for that to happen?
It is a small window, mainly because of sea surface temperatures, but also wind shear. You
said it was making a run for it.
It could make a run for it.
I mean, if it's going to make a run for it, it's got about 18 hours to do so.
Would that be one of the fastest developing systems?
No.
No?
Nope. Alright then, we've got 15 minutes until the 8 PM advisory from the National Hurricane Center. We'll let you know as soon as that update comes out. I imagine they'll be waiting for some more recon data. Tim, any updates? Do you think they'll get anything?
No, Nathan. NOAA 3 has made that northeast pass. I think that's going to be the last pass we're going to get before the NHC issues their advisory. They did go with 952 on their second dropson drop, so probably I would probably say 115 or 120, 952 might be what the NHC runs with.
About our earlier Category 5 chat as well, Kylo Tech reminds us of Isabel, of course, too, which gained Category 5 status around the same time of year as well. About 10 days ago it would have been. Other comments about, is it concerning that this season is more inactive than the last 2 years? I don't think so. I think it's fantastic.
No.
We were due for an inactive season, although we can't say that this has been inactive. I mean, we've got this right in front of us, and possibly another one on the way. So quieter, we appreciate that, but it's not what you would call an inactive season. Not like the olden days, when in some seasons we may have only got 4 storms. And
2 active storms.
2013, where we only got 2 hurricanes and no majors.
I mean, I'll be honest, Nathan. I mean, this is peak season. 2 storms active during this time of the year is not unusual. And it's not like we're going to have anomalies like 2020 and 2021, where we had 4 to 7 storms active at the peak of the season. That's just not something you normally see all the time.
More comments about video footage that people have seen from the Turks and Caicos, and it's devastating and still getting battered apparently. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all, given how close the storm was there. Will Fiona become a Category 5, and after that will it affect central New York State? So pretty much no to both of those answers. Definitely the
No
latter
and
one.
no.
Definitely the latter one.
And we might get one more pass, Nathan. NOAA 3 not wasting any time. They are literally slamming this northeastern quadrant yet again.
Damn.
Wow.
I mean, they are literally their path, and I actually have it up on my screen here, and I can kind of illustrate this out. They are not messing around. They've came in off of this side of the storm, and they've literally have come down, looped around, went down, went back out, and they've gone back in for a third northeast path. So they are really hammering this northeastern quadrant right before the NAC is supposed to be getting the information out for their 8 o'clock update.
That's got to be stressful.
Yeah. Sounds like to
What
me
is
that
the
this is the quadrant
impact?
that they're most worried about.
Well, it usually is, Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Northeastern is usually the strongest.
Yeah, but like I said, I've never seen this behavior before.
Probably
again, I
anxious
did
to get it in before the update.
I mean, like I said, I'm still fairly new to this, but this is not something I've seen from Recon before.
Now, I don't think I've ever seen a recon plane make 3 passes off the northeast quadrant simultaneously within like a 40-minute span. So they're probably really looking at the data. The onboard Mets probably requested this second and third pass because they know that what they find and what they convey to the National Hurricane Center is going to be very crucial on whether the NAC goes with 120, 125, or a 950, 952 millibar pressure. Not saying that's what they're going to go with, but that would be my reasoning as to why they're hitting this northeast quadrant so hard. They want to make absolutely sure their data is on point for the NAC at the top of the hour.
And more good information about intensity rate as well.
Absolutely, yes.
So we'll wait for that information. I imagine our numbers at the bottom of the screen will have to change soon. Those of you who know our coverage, I basically do everything. I'll have to update that bar myself. It will take a while to update. So you'll bear with me on that, I hope. But in the next hour, we'll have our Tropical Weather Bulletin hour, where we'll take a proper look at the models around the world and all the other storms and disturbances that could develop in the next 5+ days. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, please continue to send your comments and questions in regarding Fiona and the other Atlantic systems. If you've just joined us, Hurricane Fiona is, from the last update, 115 miles per hour and a pressure of 959, but the recon planes are in there and they're getting quite a stronger storm, pressure around 950, and the satellite presentation is really good, much better than the recon estimates, but those are actual observations, so they obviously come first in the pecking order for accuracy. Gaston formed earlier today as well and is already looking good. Our team went with 60 miles per hour for the storm, and that is starting to, it of course developed a potential eye earlier on, and there it is once again. Not looking quite as good in those latest frames. And we're still monitoring Invest 98L, which is likely to become a tropical cyclone entering the eastern Caribbean. There it is down there, just a disturbance headed towards Trinidad and Tobago at this time, but things can change quickly in this basin. David?
Satellite imagery, since we've been on air, you can notice how both systems are developing. I think it's far better. You see all the ride in Gaston, and one word, Meduki effect, or how's that playing out?
The Medoki La Nina?
Medoki, yes. Compared to other years when we have looked at the other hurricanes.
Alright, well, Medoki is a term that was first coined by a Japanese fellow. It's actually a Japanese word meaning sort of or kind of. And it referred to the El Nino, which is a period of above average sea surface temperatures in the Pacific that has a pronounced effect on climatological patterns around the world. And when they call it a Medoki El Nino, it's where you have the same effect but in more towards the central part of the Pacific Ocean, because usually the big barometer is in the eastern part of the ocean. But this time it's a Medoki La Nina, which is something that hasn't really been coined before. It only applied to El Ninos because we never had one for La Nina, which is the opposite, cooler temperatures than average in the Pacific. And this time the La Nina is further over the central part of the Pacific, and not so much in the eastern part. Although that has changed a little bit in the last few weeks, I should mention. They've cooled a little bit to the east again, so it's becoming more of a classic La Nina again. But that just really shows a wild card as to what our climatological patterns are going to look like, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, since accurate ocean measuring sources in 1984, there has never been a setup like this year's, and so it has unexpected repercussions for the tropical cyclone activity for the year, and we really don't know what we're expecting. We've had one of the quietest starts to a year on record in the northern hemisphere up to the end of August, with at one point ACE values in the North Atlantic down to 16% of what it should have been. Of course, that's recovered quite a bit now, but it just shows how different it is to a usual season, and how we might see a real flurry of activity towards the end of this year to make up for the start of the season. But things don't always work out that way. The equilibrium doesn't always work out just like that, but logic would say that we expect a busy period at the end of the season, starting now, I suppose. Some more questions before we finish the hour. Namadol caused over $1 billion of damages and 4 fatalities so far, according to Storm Tracker HQ. And again, that wouldn't be a surprise. Will Invest 98 have any impacts on Myrtle Beach, South Carolina? All we can say about anywhere in the southeast is that you shouldn't get a direct impact, but you'll probably get remnants of what 98L might become in the Caribbean and into the Gulf. There's a telephone going off. And would Gaston be a high-end tropical storm or Category 1 hurricane? If you mean now, it's probably still a tropical storm. Could it become a hurricane? Possibly. So lots of information that we've still got to go through as we get towards the next hour and our formal tropical weather bulletin. Just get a few more here. Funty Mirins says, how strong... Oh, it's Fun Time, Arinzi. How strong do you think 98L will get? That is one of the most open questions we'll hear tonight. We've really got no idea. Models suggesting it could get to major hurricane status later on down the line. We'll explore that a lot more in our next hour. Did they not get the strongest data from the pass on the east side of the wall rather than the northeast? That was a question there, Tim. I'm not sure what you think of that.
That first pass, they didn't get the strongest ones on the east. They were a little bit lower than what we've been getting on the northeast passes. And right now we're still waiting for that last pass data to come in. And I'm keeping an eye on the NHC data. They just issued their tropical weather outlook for 0Z. Nothing on Fiona. Actually, they have issued it. We have 26A now available. And wow.
Oh?
Yeah. Wow.
National Hurricane Center have gone with 125 miles per hour at their latest update and a pressure of 951 millibars. They did it. They went for it, Tim.
They went for it.
125, and that's a lot closer
I didn't
to
think
satellite
they would
estimates.
go for it on that one single data point, but I am surprised they pulled the trigger on it.
Wow.
Is that
No,
one
that
got
is very
back in?
surprising. Could you post that in the discussion room as well? Just so I can take a look.
Fiona is strengthening. We'll be back after this with our tropical weather bulletin. Stay tuned. Our live coverage will continue in a moment. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. This is Force 13 Live. We are covering Hurricane Fiona and all of the other activity that we've got in the Atlantic, Tropical Storm Gaston, and Invest 98L, which everyone is keenly watching for possible development entering the Eastern Caribbean Sea. We of course have other systems active around the world in the Eastern Pacific, possibly an area of interest or two there, and in the Western Pacific more areas of interest to be watching in the shadow of Nanmadol, which is now long gone, but potentially 2 more tropical storms in the next 5 days. We'll be covering all of these live tonight on our Tropical Weather Bulletin hour, which is now. We'll take a detailed look at the models, and of course we'll be picking out all the little bits of Fiona and its analysis at this time. If you just missed it at the end of our hour there, right just then at the end, we got information from National Hurricane Center where they have upgraded Hurricane Fiona to 125 miles per hour, which is a high-end Category 3, and a pressure of 951 millibars, moving north-northwest at 8 miles per hour. There are no changes to the warnings, so a hurricane warning remains in effect for the Turks and Caicos, a tropical storm warning for the southeastern Bahamas, including the Acklins, Crooked Island, Long Key, the Inaguas, Mayaguana, and the Ragged Islands, a tropical storm watch for Bermuda. There's the latest National Hurricane Center cone, which should be updated for 8 o'clock. There it is. All they do is update the position on that cone. They don't really change the forecast at all, so that won't tell you very much if you were looking for an update. The next full update will be at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Just to reveal some of the hazard information that's still active, tropical storm and hurricane conditions are occurring over portions of the Turks and Caicos, and these conditions should continue for the next few hours. Tropical storm conditions are expected over portions of the southeastern Bahamas for the next few hours. Tropical storm conditions could reach Bermuda by late Thursday or early Friday. We're expecting more rainfall still, an additional 1 to 2 inches for the British and US Virgin Islands. Puerto Rico up to an additional 1 to 2 inches with storm totals to 20 inches and local maximums of 35. Dominican Republic up to an additional 1 to 2 inches, storm totals of 20 inches possibly. Turks and Caicos additional 2 to 4 inches with storm totals of 5 to 10 inches. The Southeast Bahamas expecting 1 to 4 inches and for Bermuda 1 to 3 inches. Storm surge could raise water levels by as much as 1 to 3 feet above normal tide levels along the immediate coast in areas of onshore winds in the Turks and Caicos through this evening. And of course, for swells generated by Fiona affecting the northern coast of Hispaniola, the Turks and Caicos Islands, and the southeastern and central Bahamas. East coast of the United States will probably start to see these swells in the next day or two and reach Bermuda by early Thursday. These can cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions. We've seen too many people lose their lives from distant storms due to bad surf along the coast of the US. Anyway, if you've got comments and questions for us whilst we're on the air, we are here for the hour to talk about everything in the tropics, with probably most emphasis, it was bound to happen, some emphasis on Fiona. Right then, let's talk to my team, which you could just hear then. With me tonight, we have Jose, Christian, David, and Timothy. Hello to all of you once again.
Hello.
Good to be here.
As we look again at the infrared imagery, the rapid scan, the black area surrounding the eye is now pretty much completely encircling it in the eye wall, minus 70-degree cloud tops. Tim, you had a few more recon revelations.
Yeah, Nathan. I had went back through the recon data during our last break before our TWB segment, and we were scratching our heads why the NHC went with 125-951, and comes to find out that the NOAA 3 plane, as we know last hour, made 3 rapid passes through the northeastern quadrant of the storm. And they found that on all 3 of those passes that there was enough data to support the 125 reading. There was 4 or 5 data points on each of the pass where winds were above 110 knots flight level, which once you convert is 125 miles per hour. And the last two drop sondes that they had put into the eye both came back at 952 millibars with a 10 knot wind, which would reduce down to 951. I know I'd said during last hour that I thought it would have been a little extreme and a little irresponsible for the NAC to go 125, 951. But I guess based on the data that they had at hand, that seemed to be a pretty reasonable interpretation based on the data.
You said that in past tense. Is it still a reasonable estimate?
I would say with the data now, it is. At the time when the data was coming in, I would have said it was a little sketchy since there wasn't enough conclusive evidence. But that third pass with 3 data points above 110 knots flight level and that 952 drops on that third pass through the Northeast, I would say the onboard Met in coordination with the National Hurricane Center probably put that together and realized, yeah, 125, 951 is pretty reasonable then.
Looking very good on the satellite imagery as the geocolor becomes the enhanced infrared there. Well, the geocolor infrared. Looking at Gaston as well, for those who have missed it so far, well, there it was, possibly developing an eye earlier on, which has certainly raised a few eyebrows, and our analyst team went with 60 miles per hour at the start of tonight's stream, which is quite a bit above the National Hurricane Center, which are going at a mere 40 miles per hour as they named the storm at 5 p.m. But right now it appears to maybe be waning a little bit, but still probably above 40 miles per hour. They won't do another full update though until 11 p.m. Eastern Time or Atlantic Standard Time. So we've got a little wait on before we find out what they think of it then. There will be an ASCAP pass before that, probably about an hour from now. I don't think we'll be here to catch it, unfortunately. But I imagine that will have a lot of information on Gaston. And this imagery that you might have glimpsed earlier is a look down in the deep tropics near Trinidad and Tobago, out into the main development region on the right hand side, and that tropical disturbance there, that's Invest 98L, and that is currently moving or drifting westwards, and not looking so great in those later frames, potentially sheared away by Fiona's influence, which you can sort of just about make out on the northern peripheries of your screen. Will enter the Caribbean Sea and could become our next tropical cyclone. High chance of development from the National Hurricane Center. They should have actually just updated it. Let's see if there's a... Yep, 90% now they're going with. So they seem pretty sure that it's going to become a tropical cyclone and head into the eastern Caribbean Sea. Yeah, and in the 5-day period, they have a 40% off the coast of Africa, which I think is a good call as well. We'll check the models on all of those systems a little bit later on, so stay tuned for that. Let's take some comments first. Could Gaston become a hurricane, and could it have serious effects on the Azores? It looks like it could get close to the Azores, and it could stall near the Azores as well. In fact, if we go to the National Hurricane Center's wind field here, this one's supposed to be for Fiona, but you can see Gaston in the background as well. You'll notice there that there's some 50% chances for the westernmost isles of the Azores. So that's a decent enough chance for tropical storm force winds right there. And that could also be quite a bit of rain too if Gaston stalls over there, which is currently what could happen due to a blocking high. And of course it won't be able to go back left very much because Fiona's there by the time it's up there as well, so it gets a little bit stuck for a while. More comments. If the team is able, will we stream Fiona's landfall in Nova Scotia this weekend? We'll do our level best to stream whatever we can, really, when the storms strike land. Will the extratropical transition be like Teddy in 2020? Well, I have had thoughts about that recently. It feels a bit like Teddy, a bit further towards the west right now. I don't know. I mean, I think it may well. Only it'll be stronger. Windfield probably won't be quite as large, but it'll be stronger, much stronger than Teddy. Is it possible for a hurricane to strike Portugal as a Category 1? Well, if you remember, for a time it looked like Leslie was going to do that. People remember that storm. Was that 2018? Was it that long ago?
I think it was, Nathan. I think the last two storms, at least that I remember, historically impacting Portugal in some shape or form would have been Leslie in 2018 and Vince back in Vince in 05 and in Alpha. So I think those are the three storms I can remember distinctly impacting Portugal.
Another comment there. Invest 98 looks like it has a similar path as Bonnie. I don't think so. I think it will lift into the Gulf. More questions here, and everyone talking about different systems, so sometimes it might get unclear, so hopefully we get the right one. A question there, is 145 mile per hour possible? For Fiona that must be, and I would say absolutely yes, it is possible. Could Major Hurricane Fiona affect Maine? And what effects will it bring to Maine? Right now, in fact, if we go back to that cone again, you can see that eastern Maine is in a 5 to 10% chance of tropical storm conditions. So make of that what you will. Chances are low. In terms of rainfall, you could see around 1 to 2 inches of rain in Maine, particularly further inland along the Canadian border from Fiona. So generally, minor impacts. Will Fiona impact Bermuda with major winds? That is probably a big question right now for Bermuda, and that's where it's going next. Just a small forecast swing to the east would put Bermuda in great danger. So it's still a few days out from there yet. Was it 2 days? And some more comments as well. Hone when?
Of course.
Good question. Good question. We've no idea. GFS is hinting at a high-end Category 4 in the Gulf and a high-end Category 4 landfall in Florida. And what do we think of that? Storms have done it in the past. That's all I can really say. No indication that this storm would do the same, but we know just what the Atlantic can be like. It cannot be ruled out at this time of year. Will 98L become a PTC, a potential tropical cyclone? That's up to the National Hurricane Center and whether any of the agencies issue any warnings for the national areas. And then they will consider probably warnings, advisories for a potential tropical cyclone. So I suppose it could happen actually, and the way it's looking right now, that might actually be more possible than I might have first thought. And how concerned are we about Invest 98L?
Good question.
Is it? Well, I mean, we're concerned about every storm, but Invest 98L has the potential to be a very powerful storm. But it's got to get through a few days of quite choppy seas, of wind shear, which could break it down before it even begins. But we'll just have to cross the bridge when we come to it. If it gets into the Western Caribbean intact, and if it's already quite strong by then we've got a big problem on our hands.
And ocean heat content will be ripe in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. Tim, you had an image there still, didn't you?
Yeah, I've got not only the ocean heat content image, but I've got the models and the multi-diagnostics for every system that we could imagine, from Fiona, Gaston to 98L, including 94W. So we have everything racked up whenever you're ready to go over it, Nate.
Well, I'll be doing the mapping for the models part. So if you could do everything else and start with the oceanic heat content, please.
All right, I've got that up whenever you're
Yep.
ready for it.
Yep.
This is the Atlantic that we're
wow.
looking at.
looks-
And
That looks a lot better than the bulletin I last did.
Was it a different
Yeah,
color scheme?
this one's issued out from the University of Miami. So that
Yeah.
might be a different source. This is usually the source that I end up using. And you can see right along the north central part of the Caribbean, south of Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, a lot of Fiona. This is actually the area that Fiona went through, which is why we did see it intensify a steady amount when it was going through Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. Right now, Fiona is up in this area just to the northeast of the Turks and Caicos, where there is still easily 100 to 115 kilojoules of ocean heat content, which is why we will probably see this continuing to intensify all the way up towards Bermuda. And what is interesting to note is along the forecast path, there is still some decent ocean heat content once you get above 35, 40 degrees north, as this does go up towards the Maritime Canada region. As for 98L, I think the track has it going through the Central Caribbean. Plenty of fuel there, but when we get into the diagnostics, you'll see wind shear is definitely going to be the biggest inhibitor for 98L going through the Central Caribbean. Once it gets into the Western Caribbean, I believe shear is supposed to drop. And once you get up towards southwestern Cuba and by the Yucatan, this has been a particular hotspot at least the last 4 or 5 seasons that I've tracked this region, Nathan. And anything coming through here could easily explode into a very significant system.
It's a massive hotspot.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, go on to the model plots then.
All right, we will go with the first one here. This is Fiona that we're looking at. This is the 18Z1 right now. HMON and HWARF indicating right now Category 3 GFS is a little behind as a Category 1. Obviously, NHC running with 110 knots, which would be right in line with some of the models. But what is concerning, and this is something we discussed last hour, Nathan, is most of the models are indicating this will turn extratropical and will deepen due to baroclinic forcing. Now, for
that's some transition there. That's incredible.
Yeah, and what some viewers might not know is there's actually 2 forces when it comes to cyclonic activity that can influence a storm. That is cyclogenesis, is what we normally see out of tropical storms. And then you have baroclinic forcing, which is what we normally see up in the Iceland, Greenland, over towards the Scandinavian area when Europe deals with windstorms. So 2 different dynamics can intensify these systems. And what's going to be unique with Fiona is it's going to go from a cyclogenic forcing into a baroclinic forcing when it turns into an extratropical system. And what's very concerning is, sea surface temperatures are just going to bottom out. Wind shear is going to skyrocket. But the baroclinic forcing is going to allow the system to intensify even more. GFS hinting at almost 100 knots. ECWMF, the Euro, thinking 115. H1 and HWARF thinking 130 knots. So
that can't at landfall.
Right around the 24th. Yeah, this would put it right around Nova Scotia, up into Newfoundland, up into the Labrador region. So maritime traffic and the southern-facing coastlines of Newfoundland, Labrador, and Nova Scotia could really get hammered if this actually comes to fruition.
There's no way you're going to get me to believe that it'll be 130 knots up there.
I wish I could say these models were just loopy, but when you've got 3 models the Euro, H-Warp, and H-Mon all bringing it above 115 knots. It's hard to dispute the science behind it, to be honest.
I don't know about that. I mean, those models have a tendency to exaggerate a bit. GFS right now, I've just checked, saying 105 miles per hour over land when it moves over that area. Even that would be quite extraordinary.
Yeah, that would be pretty consistent. I mean, GFS does have 95 knots at 18Z on the 23rd, and I would say the GFS is probably the more reasonable of the four models that is looking at this down range. But moving on to the other storms, Nathan, getting over to Gaston or Gaston, depending how you pronounce it, could be a threat to the Azores. It's not going to have a lot of time to really get its act together. I know we've been looking at satellite imagery, some evidence to support an eye-like feature on infrared and regular imagery. It's only going to have about 18 hours to really get its act together. Wind shear is going to get above about 20 knots by about 6Z tomorrow morning, and sea surface temperatures are going to start to slowly drop. So it's not going to have much. Yeah. So, I mean, if it's going to make a run for hurricane status, it's got a very limited window, and that window is starting to slam shut rather quickly.
We'll check back with that imagery shortly, with the imagery of it, but the way it was looking, it may have already peaked, for all we know. We'll find out.
Possible.
Just pointing out there that, just go back to Gaston a minute, towards the end of that track there, the models really don't know where to take it. The models have not only got to figure out where the storm was going, but in order to do that, they have to figure out the positioning of Fiona. They have to figure out the positioning of the big blocking high pressure that's causing Gaston to stall in the first place. So they've got a lot more uncertainty about what actually happens to the storm and which way it ends up going and when.
Yeah. It looks like the H-Mon, GFS, and H-Wharf do take it into the westernmost island of the Azores. The Euro does take it just a little south of it.
All right, let's move on.
And this is probably the one that a lot of people are going to be asking about. This is 98L. Obviously, this is still in invest, so some of the model confidence is a little sketchy at best, since most of the models still haven't really initialized it. But right now, H-Wharf is the only one that does bring it up to tropical storm status through the lower Leeward Islands and into the central Caribbean. Does have it weakening to a minimal tropical storm by 18Z on the 23rd. That is in due part to the shear jumping up to about 30 knots.
And then it drops south of Haiti, I think.
Yeah, down to about 5 to 7 knots on 12Z the 25th, which at that point it could be over by Jamaica, and that's where we could see it really start to ramp up into the storm that some people are fearing.
Yep, absolutely. And the Western Pacific?
The only one we've got on the radar right now is 94W, and the GFS is the only one that's really keeping an eye on it. Out in the 5-day trend, it might bring some rainy conditions to the southern part of Honshu and Kyushu, but overall not looking to be a very significant threat, considering this area of the world has had Hinamore and Namadol come through this area in the last 2 to 3 weeks.
All right, thank you for that. We'll have a proper look at the whole of the GFS model a little bit later. In the meantime, let's go back to take a look at the latest satellite imagery of Fiona. Any more recon news by any chance?
Taking a look, it looked like Recon had a small outage with their barometer, and yeah, they had a small outage. It looks like it has come back on within the last 13 minutes. So we'll have to see if they're going to make another pass. But once they did finish that third pass, looks like their barometric instrument did go out for about a total of 30 minutes. So we'll have to see if they make another pass or not.
really starting to look better and more round on this satellite imagery, with those massive bands on the eastern side blowing up. A lot of energy in those cloud tops, well into the -70s and one or two -80 areas there from some of the overshooting tops. Very good appearance now. When we watch it for a couple of hours live here in the chair, we sort of don't notice the changes until you watch it over, until you like take an image from 3 hours ago to now, where you'll notice the difference a lot more plainly. But clearly getting a lot better in that imagery. The eye appears to still be deepening. The black areas are more wrapping around the center of the storm. There's really no sign. Well, there's maybe one little gap there in the northwestern side, but looking very good on the satellite imagery, and looks like intensification is here to stay. 125 miles per hour according to the recon plane from the National Hurricane Center's update, and an estimated central pressure of 951 also from recon observations. It looks to me as though this storm will reach Category 4 status, and not just that, but possibly towards the medium to high end Category 4. Well, could it even make a run at Category 5 status? That would be a question for the enthusiasts out there, I suppose, but it would be extremely unlikely. Nonetheless, a very powerful storm in Hurricane Fiona. Bermuda, a tropical storm watch, and that will likely be upgraded to a warning within 24 hours as the storm draws nearer. Let's check on Gaston again and just check the latest frames, and here it is once again. Try and establish and figure out whether it might have passed peak. Oh no, I don't think so. When you look at that latest image, that is more rounding, that eye there. That's very interesting imagery, and a little bit of convection starting to blow up again. It's going to be very interesting what happens, what the National Hurricane Center will make of this storm in their next update. Matthew Lloyd, thank you so much for your support tonight. Says, is it correct that it's looking at a Category 3 or even 4 landfall in Nova Scotia according to the models, possibly? Well, one thing, it won't be tropical. It will be post-tropical, which means a larger wind field, and it should mean a lessering of the winds. I would still suggest right now that we're looking at Category 2 conditions in eastern Nova Scotia and possibly western Newfoundland in 4 days. 3 or 4 days. Category 3 or 4, I would doubt, but you could get gusts to that level. Can't rule that out at all. What's the strongest storm to hit that part of Canada? Well, tropical storms, we've only ever had Category 2 landfalls. One, and what was it again in the 60s, and Dorian's impacts as well.
I think you mentioned one from 1961, Nathan.
68 or 69, I think it was. I can't remember. And Category 1 landfalls from Igor, for instance. That was a very well-known one in Newfoundland. And yet that was only, in quotation marks, a Category 1. I don't know what the deepest storm is in terms of pressure. I haven't been able to track that one down. If anyone knows, who might be a slightly better historian than me, then please let us know in the comments. And that's where you can continue to send your comments and questions right now. What do we think is the most likely and unlikely track outcome of Invest 98L? Well, there could be a whole large amount of unlikely tracks, but the most likely track, I would suggest, personal opinion, is probably very close to Jamaica and the Caymans and western Cuba and into the Gulf of Mexico, and who knows where from there. In a moment we'll take a look at the full GFS model suite, but we'll just keep looking at this satellite imagery for a little bit more, and a wider shot here looking at everything to do with Fiona there, Gaston in the picture on towards its northeast, and right down towards the bottom right there, that other system at 98L, which National Hurricane Center have now given a 90% chance of development, up from 80 at the last advisory. Christian, did you want to add something?
No, sorry, I'm talking to myself. I just
Oh.
realised my mic is still on. So
Right.
I'm trying to get this graphic cleared.
Very good.
I
We're all doing
do
different
have
bits of work here.
something interesting for you, Nathan. We actually have the advisory 6 p.m. from Environment Canada, basically Canada's version of the National Hurricane Center.
All right. What's it showing us?
It is showing by 3 p.m. Saturday that we could be looking at a Nova Scotia landfall with winds of 155 kilometers an hour. Would be right around high end category 1, low end category 2, and then
Yep.
even then it still keeps it as almost a 65 mile an hour tropical storm, 100 kilometer an hour system by the time it does get north of Labrador.
Yeah, that's more like it. It's probably going to be about 100 miles an hour at landfall in Nova Scotia. Probably 105 actually, but it's interesting. All right, then let's go to the model section and take a look at the full picture here with our graphics in the studio. Here's Fiona then. The GFS initializes the storm quite low, 101, 108. Let's see, how high is that? About 110 miles per hour. So that's a bad start already, initializing it a little bit low. What happens to it though? Well, let's watch. Moving northwards, strengthening and strengthening a little bit more and some more. Let's just try and get a probe in there. 120 miles per hour near Bermuda. I mean, that is lowballing it. It's going to be more than that. And staying strong up here as well, look. Nearly 130 miles per hour at the same latitude as the Delmarva Peninsula, and off it goes again and then swings westwards right into, I mean, look at the winds there off the coast near the Nova Scotia landfall, 115 miles per hour, so it could be a category 3 strength by the time it reaches land in Nova Scotia, and could be probably not still tropical, but it won't be long after it turns extra tropical, and then piles right through there, actually stalls a little bit, slows down, and then weakens very quickly after that through Labrador. That's the GFS's take on it. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. Here's Gaston in the meantime. You can see it there. GFS initializes it with winds of 60 miles per hour, so actually in agreement with our analyst team. And off it goes northeastwards. You can see some of the Azores there. Tropical storm force winds for one or two of them. Now look what happens here. Let's explain this situation. We have a massive blocking high pressure there, probably about 1036-ish, maybe a little bit less than that. High pressure. It's blocking the storm from going anywhere. It can't really go that way, because there's another low pressure system here. It definitely can't go this way because Fiona's wrath is right up along there, so it's pretty much staying still. And watch what happens. The high pressure blocks it off. It starts to move a little bit up towards Fiona, and the high pressure still being really stubborn. Even at this point it's there, and eventually Gaston rounds it and turns post-tropical. Not much is left of it by the time. Oh no, that does strengthen. Previous model run didn't have it, but there it is with tropical storm force winds through the British Isles. Extra tropical by
great.
then. Yep. You're welcome, Christian. Let's go to Africa, and what happens with that third system that we're watching. A 40% chance that we were looking at here. And easy to spot, I think. It's that system starting to appear. Well, I thought it would have been easy to spot. GFS is actually not very fond. It's much later on in the run that it actually develops it. That's the 24th there. What day is that? Friday? Saturday? and then it's a brief spin-up tropical cyclone that doesn't last very long in the eastern Atlantic. Quite common in September. Not much happens. Okay, what about the other one then, 98L? That's what everyone wants to see here. So first of all, I think that might be it here. Let's just monitor that and see where it goes. No, it's a little bit further west. There it is. Within 24 hours, the GFS has it having tropical storm force winds, half a circulation. So by this point, it's definitely a PTC because it's going to be delivering tropical storm force winds. At what point does it become a TC? Maybe here, maybe there. That's on the 23rd, the morning of the 23rd. And once again, that is Friday. And off it goes, westwards, struggling a little bit to get strong. Early hours of Saturday, it's here. Tropical storm again. And by this point, it's got better conditions, it's growing, it's getting stronger. The yellows come out, that's a Category 1 hurricane. And a bit stronger now as it approaches western Cuba. This is getting quite far out though. This is a 27th on a system that's not yet formed, day 6. And into western Cuba as a powerful Category 3, maybe even a Category 4 hurricane. Into the 28th by that point. Category 3, 115 miles per hour. Into the Gulf of Mexico, that's the last thing you want to see. That's 7 days out. So you're at the point where it can't be fully ruled out, but you can't really say that it's in yet either. What happens next? Well, there it is, Category 4 into the Gulf of Mexico and staying quite strong, weakening a bit before making landfall in the Florida Panhandle. Actually weakens a lot as it makes landfall there, barely a Category 1 by the time it does. Then inland and moves off northeastwards, not much remains of it actually. So that's that. A big threat nonetheless. Anything else after that in the Atlantic? Let's take a look at the ultra long range, and there's a little tropical cyclone that might form there right at the very end of that loop. Alright, let's go to the Eastern Pacific and see what we've got here. First of all, the remnants of Madeline, visible there. Where does that go? It just keeps on going. Not fond of any of those areas of interest anymore, which the GFS had spent time forming and not forming. Actually, one might briefly do it there, very briefly. Behind that, though, nothing on the whole run. 16 days of nothing for the Eastern Pacific. Ethan would be depressed. Central Pacific then, let's have a look. And I think this might get a bit more depressing for Central Pacific fans. No activity on the cards at all. Western Pacific then, obviously Philippines watching out maybe for a typhoon in the next week. Is the GFS still set on that? First of all, 94W, that's there. And then you've got this area, which is all gyrating around a big low pressure system here. So they're all going around that way. Pardon me again. And they're all switching around that. And there it goes, one of them. 94W ends up here, affecting Japan. Even in that big mess that it's in there, not a TC, it could still deliver quite significant rainfall amounts to southern Japan there, up to and over 10 inches possibly. And then what happens? Well, this Philippine Sea system eventually starts to form, ends up still on the southern side of that low. And then there it goes, strengthening rapidly. Oh my goodness. Strong typhoon there. This is the GFS. It's low resolution. So when you see it predict a 130 mile per hour typhoon there, it's likely much stronger. Small core makes landfall in Luzon, and that is on the 27th, which is 6 days out. So that's a little bit more believable than the Gulf storm. 6 days out. That could be a serious possibility there of a sneak up and packed a punch there into the South China Sea, where it really grows and becomes a typhoon again and strikes Hong Kong on the 29th.
How many days out is that?
And that's only 7 days out, so that can't be ruled out either. And into China. Very interesting. Meanwhile, further east, another system. Well, first of all, you get all this mess. That might become a brief TC. This over here might become a brief tropical cyclone, though I doubt it. Further up, actually, it might do so. And then later on, you've got this system that forms on the 27th. That's 5 days out. What becomes of that in the long range? A typhoon. And it really messes up along the coast of Japan there and weakens, becomes post-tropical. And eventually another system coming up there in the late range there. So it looks like the Western Pacific is going to stay busy. Let's check the Indian Ocean. Anything here north or south? Oh yes, there is. GFS wanting another early season tropical cyclone in the South Indian Ocean. That would be the third one this year.
Oh,
And lasting
great.
for a little bit there. That forms on the 25th. So that's only 4 days out. Could happen. It's going to be a close one once again, I'm sure. South Pacific, any signs of early activity? GFS has been hot and cold with a potential system near Papua New Guinea. On this run, there's no sign of it. Moving over to the South Atlantic, please no. Don't worry, there's nothing there. At this time of year, even Europe could get in on the action in the Mediterranean. But thankfully, it looks like there is nothing expected there. So that's a full look at all of those models right now, or all of the GFS visualizations around the world. It's looking like we're going to have a busy end to September from what I can see there. So pretty crazy times ahead, it would seem. Comments from the team?
What a time we live in.
Welcome to peak season. Enough said.
Yeah, it does feel like that now. It didn't feel like that a few weeks ago.
We do have an update on the reconnaissance in Fiona. Their last drops on that went in about 10 or 15 minutes ago got a pressure reading of 950 with a 4-knot wind, which would bring it to 949.6.
Ooh.
So this is still deepening.
A little bit.
Really? Yeah, and I'm also hearing reports, don't take this as gospel truth, but apparently we now have 95W.
That wouldn't
again,
surprise me either, yeah.
Because, yeah, I'm still hearing reports. I can't confirm if this is 100% true or not.
No, it is true. 95W, 17.4 north, 132.4 east. And that is the one that I marked just before in the Philippine Sea. So that's now been designated an invest.
Okay.
Right now, here's some imagery of Fiona. Looking very good. Still not fully bridged that gap on the northern side with the deep cloud tops. But it is getting rounder and rounder, actually, the more you look at that imagery. A little bit sloppier earlier. ADT now supports 150 miles per hour.
Wow.
It's quite extraordinary.
That's very, very strong.
And the more satellite imagery looks like that, and for the longer it remains like that, then chances are the actual winds inside the storm will catch up. Of course, 125 miles per hour now, because Recon, their observations are more valuable than satellite estimates. They're much, much closer to the storm. Satellites are
Estimates.
thousands of miles in space.
Yeah,
And Recon planes are only about 1,000 feet above the ground sometimes. Doesn't beat ground observations, of course, but Recon are much, much closer and more accurate than satellite. Only problem with Recon is that they can't get the whole storm at the same time. They have to fly through it.
And again, that's easier said than done.
Certainly is. Very tough conditions flying through these storms. Keep sending in your comments and questions. We've only got about 5 or 10 minutes to run here. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. I'm sure we had one or two earlier. I'm trying to find some comments that we've not had yet. In fact, I don't think we have. So please send them in if you.
I mean, one
haven't
just came in.
Is Fiona retired? Well, no, it's being used
No,
right now.
it's active, so
There'll
no.
be no decisions about retirement until next year, no matter how bad a storm gets. That eye's looking pretty wacky.
Looking very wobbly as well.
Let's go back to some other imagery just to see if we're getting the same kind of thing. Yeah, it really does look like that. Very jagged edges on the western side.
Yeah, I saw that as well. What's up with that? Yeah, and that feature to the east seems to be getting bigger.
Big blow-ups there, continuing.
Yeah.
Very
This
impressive
storm.
storm, though.
Yeah, and still intensifying by the looks of things.
Maybe I'm just seeing signs that perhaps it's just stopped a little bit, and it sounds like what I was hearing on recon there, that the rate of strengthening has really dropped, Tim.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Recon's still in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
still in there.
Yeah, Recon is still in there. Let me take a look at what they had from their last pass. I believe it may have dropped 2 more millibars on their drop sonnet data. Let me take a look here. Drop 13 was the last I pass, and that was 950 millibars at a 4-knot wind, which would be 949.6. Drop 11 was 952 with a 10-knot wind, which would break down to 951. So it is still deepening. There was about a 34-minute gap between drop 11 and drop 13. So that would be about a 1.4 millibar drop in 35 minutes. So I would still say it's probably deepening. If I had to estimate, about 2 millibars an hour, that would probably be the highest I would estimate it at.
The US Navy's ATCF system is suggesting that Gaston is up to 50 miles per hour on their estimates. So a little bit stronger. I reckon it's probably 60 miles per hour. Some more comments that are coming in. Rod Pyle says it may be too early to say, but what kind of conditions could Halifax expect? Halifax, Nova Scotia, one of the largest cities there, likely to receive tropical storm conditions and maybe hurricane conditions. Too early to say what yet, but tropical storm conditions probably. It'll be windy. Rainfall estimates probably up to 4 inches. Gold Gamer says, I saw on GFS that there might be a system that comes into the Caribbean after 98L and possibly gains little strength. Is there any info on that possible system? I haven't seen much on that. I would not speculate at all, considering 98L hasn't even formed yet. So, one at a time, I think. Has any recorded hurricane ever struck Jacksonville, Florida? I'm sure there have. And I'm going to find out for you, of course. History is sort of my department, so I'll find out what we have over there in Jacksonville. Some people might say that history is irrelevant, but sometimes it can be very useful for predicting how things go moving forward. Sometimes it can be a very useful tool. But no, the worst storms for Jacksonville, Dora was just south of there as a Category 2 landfall. No storm has ever made landfall over Jacksonville stronger than Category 2. And that one was a hurricane in 1888, which probably weakened to a Category 1 by the time it was over Jacksonville. So I would say probably Category 1 was the highest strength storm ever received in Jacksonville, and that was the Okeechobee hurricane of 1928, which made landfall in southern Florida as a Category 4 and was devastating.
Yeah, Jacksonville is kind of like Savannah in that aspect, Nathan, of where it's right in that small bend on the east coast of the U.S. where unless you get a due west system coming in at about 30 degrees north, you're not going to get a direct landfall. As you alluded to with the Okeechobee hurricane, that most of the impacts for anything on the east coast of Florida north of say maybe Jacksonville up in that area is primarily going to come off the west side of the state from a landfalling system, and then we'll end up hitting them directly at that point.
What do we believe is the chances of the Gulf storm hitting Orlando, Florida? I would say that is a less chance. Not the most likely scenario. I would say it is going to be Florida Panhandle or further west even. But it's still very early to say. It's about 10, how many days out was it? 10 days?
About 9 days out, and even then, most of the models have a very low confidence beyond that. Usually the 10 to 16 range model confidence is about 8 to 15%, which is not very high.
Let's have one more look at the National Hurricane Centre's forecast cone for Fiona. If you've not seen it so far, there it is from the 8 p.m. intermediate advisory. And if you missed that advisory, they proclaimed that the storm has intensified to 125 miles per hour thanks to observations from Hurricane Hunter aircraft. Pressure of 951. Hurricane warning remains in effect for Turks and Caicos, marked in red. Tropical storm warning for the southeastern Bahamas, marked in blue, including the Acklins, Crooked Island, Long Key, the Inaguas, Mayaguana, and the Ragged Islands. And a tropical storm watch for Bermuda. Strengthening is forecast over the next couple of days, as we know. Hurricane force winds extend outwards up to 35 miles, and tropical storm force winds extend outwards up to 150 miles. And as you can see on the cone, expected to remain a major hurricane for the next 3 days until it turns post-tropical and slams into the Canadian Maritimes on Friday night into Saturday. Bermuda is going to get a close call from this as well, even though it is just outside the cone. You'll note that the wind field is probably already bigger than the cone even at that point in time. So, and the wind field is only going to get larger, so Bermuda is pretty much guaranteed tropical storm force winds. Hurricane force winds maybe if it veers a little bit further east than expected. But that is Fiona right now, the most major feature in the tropics today. Let's just get some final satellite images from the geocolor views. First of all, Fiona, of course, there it is. And that view is looking a lot better. Wow, it really is. Eye getting a lot smoother. Let's look at Gaston. What's that up to? Again, still, I don't know where we're going to go next with that, but I think that eye might be getting more pronounced again. I think Gaston is making a run at hurricane status right now. And looking down towards the southern area into the eastern Caribbean over Trinidad and Tobago into the central Atlantic. That little area of interest, we'll start to see more rotation soon, I think. We're seeing little bits and pieces already. But we'll see more soon, I think. 90% chance of developing as it enters the eastern Caribbean. Any final comments from our team?
Well, Fiona appears to still be, I was going to say strengthening there, but I'm not. That's the case. Nonetheless, it is still a very, very dangerous storm. Currently headed towards the northwest, I believe. Gaston the cat.
Nearly north now.
Nearly north. But yeah, Gaston could be making a run for hurricane status. Not quite sure where it's headed right now. But yeah, it's got a very, very, very limited window of opportunity to make hurricane status. It could get there, it may not get there, who knows. Once again, not quite sure where it's headed, but if it does get in the way of any land areas, please stay safe.
Tim?
Yeah, kind of echoing what Christian has said. For Bermuda, Canada, definitely you need to be making your preparations now. An interesting statement as I was digging through some more of the Canadian Hurricane Center. This is Canada's version of the National Hurricane Center out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And this is right off of their recent bulletin stating, quote, that this storm is shaping up to be a potentially severe event for Atlantic Canada. Numerous weather models are quite consistent in the prediction of what we call a deep hybrid low pressure system possessing both tropical and intense winter storm type properties, but with very heavy rainfall. So even Halifax using some very strong wording for Fiona when it does enter their area of responsibility in the next 4 to 5 days.
Fairly strong. All right, thank you very much to my team. We'll see you again soon there. We're going to finish off our tropical weather bulletin now with what happened on this day. So, what did happen? Here it is on September 21st, 1938. Massive day in East Coast history when a Category 3 landfall occurred in New England. The Great New England Hurricane of 1938. 6L made landfall and caused tremendous damage and flooding and washed things away, and huge amounts of property damage from winds, everything. Really strong storm. Was a Category 5 at peak down in the tropical regions. 24W was also active in the Western Pacific. Well then, back to this year. The next name on the Atlantic naming list is Hermine. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking out for Newton, and in the Central Pacific, the next name is still Hone. 61 storms have formed so far in 2022. The next one in the Western Pacific will be named Talas, North Indian Ocean, Sitrang. And looking towards the southern hemisphere during this code red time, still very busy times across the world, but probably not down there. But if we do get one, the next name in the Australian region is Darian, the Southwest Indian Ocean starts with Ashley, and in the South Pacific, Harley. Good night from us. We'll see you again probably tomorrow night on our next Tropical Weather Bulletin.